Chapter 481, Challenging the Sea of Formations, Perfect Formation. Seeing his old friend losing his composure, Hall Master Sai was baffled. He had heard of confinement formation, illusion formation, beguilement formation, spirit gathering formation. But he had never heard of a perfect formation before. Just like with painting and pills, there are different tiers to a completed formation as well. Even when setting up the same formation, how can the might of a formation set up 2-star formation master compare to that of a 5-star formation master? Suppressing his confusion, guild leader Zheng began to explain. Hall Master Sai was taken aback. Even with formation plates of the same grade, everyone hoped to buy one inscribed by a higher rank formation master, as their craft tended to be more stable and powerful. The same applied for pills as well. Those forged by higher ranked apothecaries tended to be of higher quality and thus possessed greater medicinal effectiveness. The difference between formations mainly lies in how much they complement the environment and how much energy they can borrow from the surroundings. Seeing the incomprehension on Hall Master Sai's face, guild leader Zhang explained, formations that reach a synchronization rate of 20% with the environment are termed as initiate. A formation of this level can be successfully activated to do whatever it is intended to do. Only when one can prepare a formation of this level can one be considered an official formation master. At a synchronization rate of 40%, the formation will be able to borrow a portion of the energy from the surroundings to augment the might of the formation. At this level, one's understanding of the formation can be considered to have reached intermediate tier. As a 4-star formation master, I can still easily reach this level when setting up a grade 2 formation. Going on, at a synchronization rate of 60%, the environment and formation can be considered to be complementing one another already. This is also what we call a high-tier formation. Occasionally, while I am setting up a grade 1 formation, I can reach this level. Then, at a synchronization rate of 80%, it wouldn't be wrong to say that the environment is what that is driving the formation. Just like conscious spirit tools, a formation of this level is able to tap into the natural energy contained in the surroundings to create hurricanes, storm, trap beings, and leave them in distress. After saying that, guild leader Zheng's lips turned pale. Even if you can break out of a formation, can you break out of your environment? Hall Master Sai was stunned. One can walk out of a formation, a room, a courtyard, but everywhere one stood was the environment. So how could one walk out of it? How could one overcome it? Upon comprehending this level, even formation masters would find it hard to break out of the formation once trapped. Wait a moment. Upon recalling something, Hall Master Sai's body trembled and his eyes widened in round circles. He stared at guild leader Zhang in disbelief and asked, "That's just a synchronization rate of 80%. What about 100%? Indeed, it's exactly what you're thinking. It's known as the perfect formation." There was a slight quiver to guild leader Zhang's voice as he said, "It perfectly harmonizes with one's environment such that when it's in a dormant state, it won't cause any disturbances to the surroundings, thus giving rise to the term absence of ripples. However, the moment it is triggered, the environment will be completely changed. The formation will become the environment, and the environment is the formation. Try thinking about it. How can cultivating in a spirit-gathering formation compare up to cultivating in a natural environment? It was just like an air conditioner. No matter how comfortable the temperature was, it still couldn't compare to the warmth of spring. Using just formation flags and core to change the environment, legend has it that only formation masters of 6-star and above are capable of such a feat." At this point, even guild leader Zheng himself was in disbelief. A while ago, this fellow before him didn't even know that spirit-gathering formation plates didn't exist in the Formation Master Guild, and yet, in the next moment, he set up a formation that only 6-star formation masters were capable of, a perfect formation. Am I insane, or is the world going mad? There had never been such a happening in the history of the guild. Perplexed, the voice of the young man sounded, "You can sell the spirit-gathering formation flags, core, and blueprint to me now, right?" The formation that Xianxia had just prepared was the most basic type of spirit-gathering formation. It wasn't capable of extracting spiritual energy from the spirit stones to fuel his consumption. To do so, a formation of at least grade 4 was required. Of course. Guild leader Zhang nodded his head stiffly. If a person who was capable of forging a perfect formation was unqualified to purchase those items, then wasn't him even more unqualified? May I know, what is Xianxia's formation master rank? After agreeing to the matter, guild leader Zheng hesitated for a short moment before asking. While it was a known fact that only 6-star formation masters were capable of preparing a perfect grade 2 formation, some of the top-notch geniuses were able to do so as well. The person before him hadn't even reached transcendent mortal realm yet, so clearly, it was impossible for his rank to be too high. Even so, he wanted to know the other party's exact ranking so as to determine how he should treat him. Formation master? I've never taken the examination before, so I can't be considered as one. Xianxia shook his head. It was just a moment ago that he started learning about it so naturally. He had never taken any examination of that sort before. You aren't a formation master. Guild leader Zhang's mouth twitched and his body swayed feebly. Putting aside how other party was able to set up the formation so swiftly, the formation even reached such a high tier. And yet, the other party wasn't even an official formation master? Where in the world did this monster come from? He was a 4-star pinnacle formation master, but in terms of speed, he couldn't match up to the other party at all. And naturally, he couldn't prepare a perfect formation either. May I know if Xianxia is willing to participate in our guild's examination? A thought flashed through guild leader Zheng's mind and his eyes lit up in desire. There were countless branches under a headquarters. If the other party were to take the examination here, he would be considered as a genius of Honghai City. If the headquarters were to hear of it, they would definitely reward the Honghai City Formation Master Guild handsomely. Sure. Xianxia nodded in agreement. It didn't matter to him where he took the examination. In any case, to advance through the ranks of a master teacher, he needed more supporting occupations. Formation master was considered as one of the most influential occupations of the upper 9 paths. It would be for the best if he could become an official member of this group. Great. I'll make preparations now then. Upon hearing the other party agree to it, guild leader Zhang smiled in excitement. As for the spirit-gathering formation's formation flags, core, and blueprint, once you pass the examination, there will be no need for you to buy them. I can simply give you a set. The Formation Master Guild operated in a similar manner to the Apothecary Guild. It was extremely difficult for a low-ranked member to access content beyond their level. He would have to clear many authorizations first. However, if one's rank had reached the prerequisite, one could take it away straight even without payment. All right. Upon hearing that he could be spared from his expenses, Xianxia hurriedly nodded his head. Even though he wasn't lacking in spirit stones now, he felt that he should save as much as possible, especially since he would require a humongous amount of spirit stone to achieve breakthroughs. Several 10,000 spirit stones might be a huge fortune to other cultivators, but to him, it might not even be sufficient for him to reach Transcendent Mortal 2 Dan. Thus, he felt that he should save as much of it as possible. What is the format of the Formation Master examination? Xianxia asked. He felt that he should at least ask properly before taking the examination. Just like the Master Teacher examination, there were many variations to the Formation Master examination. Depending on the branch itself, the requirements may differ. It was just like how in Qianwu Kingdom, the examination content to becoming a 1-star Formation Master was to successfully set up a Grade 1 formation. As a prosperous city of the Myriad Kingdom Alliance, the examination here might be slightly different. The examination of our branch is indeed slightly unique as compared to the other branch. It is slightly more difficult, and it is known as the Sea of Formations. Guild leader Zhang said. Sea of Formations. Xianxia frowned. UN. The Sea of Formations refers to the multitude of formation that countless formation masters of the guild have left behind throughout the years. Upon entering it, one could meet with a formation of any kind. The condition for success is to break out of the formation one is trapped in. There is a total of 4 stages, and each stage corresponds to formations of Grade 1 to Grade 4 respectively. If one passes the first stage, one will be qualified as a 1-star formation master, and if one passes the second stage, one will be qualified as a 2-star formation master, so on and so forth. Guild leader Zheng explained. I see, that's indeed more difficult than setting up formations. Xian nodded his head. Setting up a formation and breaking out a formation was just like ascending and descending from a mountain. It was easy to ascend a mountain, but descending a mountain was fraught with many difficulties. While setting up a formation, one just had to identify the correct attributes and position the formation accurately in order to succeed. But to break out of a formation, considering that one would be within the formation, it would be hard for one to get an overview of the situation to discern the type of formation. If one were to make a lapse of judgment, it would be extremely easy for one to make a fatal mistake. It's indeed a little difficult. However, if one possesses a deep understanding of formations, it won't be a problem at all. Guild leader Zhang chuckled. Oh. Even though there are innumerable formations contained within the sea of formations, if one can accurately determine the type, name, and life gate of the formation quickly, breaking out of it would be much easier than setting up a formation. But regardless of which examination it is, be it the setting up of a formation or the sea of formations, one has to possess an in-depth understanding of formations first. Otherwise, it will be impossible for one to pass the tests. After explaining, Guild leader Zhang looked at the young man before him and said, "Since Xianxia has never taken the Formation Master examination before, you should start from the Grade 1 formations to get used to it first. This way, you can accumulate some experience such that you won't panic when meeting with formations of higher grades." Xian nodded. Then, after a moment of hesitation, he asked, "But before that, I would like to pay a visit to the library." Even the most formidable formation that he had gathered via the Library of Heaven's Path was only of Grade 2 at the moment. If he wanted to go further in the examination, he would have to browse through more books. You wish to browse through some books? That's fine as well. Xiaowu, take Xianxia to the library. It has been long since anyone has challenged the 4th stage of the Sea of Formations, so it'll require some preparation time anyway. Guild leader Zhang chuckled. He didn't think about the other party's request to browse through books much. It was natural for formation masters to request for access to books to enhance their knowledge. He also frequented the library himself to look up unique formations so as to expand his horizons. Yes. The young man Xiaowu nodded. Xianxia. Xian was led away by the young man, leaving Hall Master Sai standing in a daze on the spot with widened eyes. "Weren't you here to buy formation plates? How did it turn into you taking the Formation Master examination? That was an upper 9 paths occupation, one of the top occupations of the continent. To take the examination so abruptly. It was almost like how he challenged the harmonious stream of flowing goblets previously. Old Zheng, how far do you think Xianxia can go in the examination?" He couldn't help but turn to Guild leader Zheng. "I have no idea how many stages he can clear, but given how he's able to set up a perfect 2-star spirit gathering formation so easily, his understanding of formations can only be above mine. In other words, even at worst, he's at least a 4-star pinnacle or perhaps even 5-star. Guild leader Zhang said with a grim expression. 4-star pinnacle? 5-star? Hall Master Sai was shocked. When he first met Xianxia, he only thought that the other party was formidable in appraising, but even so, that was more than sufficient to awe him. Never in his dreams did he expect the other party to be so knowledgeable in formations as well, to the extent of surpassing even his old friend. To possess such knowledge and capability at his age. How in the world did he manage to do it? That's right. However, the Sea of Formations isn't easy. It'll be hard for those inexperienced to pass the examination. All I hope is for him to clear more stages so that another genius can rise from our branch." Guild leader Zhang nodded his head. "Clear more stages." As he replied, Hall Master Sai's mouth suddenly twitched. A thought popped into his mind. If this fellow were to challenge the Sea of Formations, would it end up just like the Appraiser Hall? Would he cause chaos in the Formation Master Guild as well? Chapter 482. The fearsome illusion formation. The books in the Formation Master Guild were significantly fewer than that of the Appraiser Hall. Almost 70% of the books were for 2-star Formation Masters and below. Having completely comprehended that level, there was no need for Xian to go through those books once more. As such, it didn't take him long to collect the books. In just 2 hours, he already had all of them duplicated in the Library of Heaven's Path. With this collection, he had sufficient books to form Heaven's Path Formation Art 3 Dan and 4 Dan. Another 2 hours passed, and he finally managed to master them. Rubbing his glabella wearily, he exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. Having collected so many books and cultivated 2 Dans of the Heaven's Path Formation Art, even though his cultivation had already reached half transcension, he still felt slightly faint-headed and his face was ghastly pale. But still, his hard work had brought him great benefits. In terms of knowledge on formation, he still might not be a match for guild leader Zheng, but in terms of setting up formations, the latter was definitely far from a match for him. More importantly. So, this is what inscribing a formation plate means. Inscribing a spirit-gathering formation sure isn't easy. With a deep understanding of formation plates, Xianxia finally understood why guild leader Zheng flew into a rage when he told him to finish it within 2 hours. Crafting a formation plate was equivalent to carving a massive formation onto a place the size of a palm. Furthermore, it had to be aligned with the environment. As such, the difficulty of the matter was extremely great. This was especially so for spirit-gathering formations. The timing of half a month that the other party gave was actually truly the fastest speed possible already. It's true that using ordinary means to inscribe a formation plate will be difficult. However, if I were to use the Heaven's Path Formation Art to do so, it would be much easier. Ordinary formations had to follow the blueprint strictly and ensure that the layout was aligned with the environment, thus making the process incredibly complex and troublesome. A single wrong mark could potentially result in the formation being ruined. On the other hand, the Heaven's Path Formation Art emphasized on continuity and smooth flow instead. There was more flexibility in it. Thus, using the Heaven's Path Formation Art to inscribe the same blueprint would be many times simpler than using ordinary means. The preparation of the Sea of Formations should be ready by now. I should go over and take a look. Shaking his head, Xianxia decided to put aside the matter regarding the formation plate for the moment and walked out of the library. Now that he had assimilated the books within the library, his understanding of formations had deepened. It was time for him to try out the Sea of Formations and become an official formation master. The Sea of Formations is just a name. Rather than an actual sea, it's just a long corridor. It is located at the 3rd floor of the Formation Master Guild, and countless formations are set up in the area. As long as one walks into the area, one will be at risk of being confined, beguiled, and even dying. That is because there are all kinds of formation in there, and that includes slaughter formations as well. But there's no need for you to worry. Every single examinee will be given a formation amulet. When you meet with true danger, you just have to crush it and the formation will immediately come to a halt. At the long corridor of the Sea of Formations, a young man gestured to the surroundings as he explained the entire proceedings to his 2 juniors. The 3 of them had come from the same teacher. It was the first time the 2 juniors behind was taking the Formation Master examination, whereas the senior in front was here to take his 2-star examination. At this moment, the 2 juniors were slightly nervous. Their lips had turned white and their palms were soaked with sweat. There's no need to worry. I'll pass the first stage later on to give you all a demonstration of the happenings inside. Remember, the formation which one will undergo is completely random, so my experience is only for reference purposes. You mustn't deal with it the exact same way as I did. Do you understand? The senior said. Senior, rest assured. We'll pay some attention to it. Let's pass the examination so as to not let teacher down. The 2 juniors behind clenched their fists tightly. Good. I'll demonstrate the examination to you all now. Take note, regardless of which formation you meet with, don't be too anxious to get through with it. You must analyze it calmly, as only then will you find the life gate and break out from it. Seeing the humility of his juniors, the senior nodded his head in satisfaction. After which, he turned around and began walking over to the long corridor of the Sea of Formations. Wang! As soon as he stepped in, mist immediately appeared. A formation had been activated, trapping the senior entirely. The first stage of the Sea of Formations, a Grade 1 formation. That wall. The duo turned to look at the wall by the side. By the side of the corridor, there was a wall made of special crystal which showed the situation of the one challenging the examination clearly. Their senior's figure was currently reflected on the wall, and at this moment, he was observing the situation around him with his eyebrows knitted together. In order to break out of the formation, one had to decipher the formation first. One had to know what kind of formation it was, where the life gate, death gate, and weakest link were. If one couldn't find these, one would never be able to break out of the formation regardless of how strong one was. Who? A compass appeared in the senior's palm and he studied it intently with a lowered gaze. After which, he took 3 steps left and 3 steps right, trying to test the formation's reaction. A short period of time later, his eyes suddenly lit up, as though having discovered something. Chuckling lightly, he started walking toward a direction at which he had decided upon. At the same moment, he gathered strength in his palm and struck out. Who? A buzzing sound echoed and the mist disappeared. A figure appeared before the duo arguing it was their senior. Did you see that? This is the first stage. As long as you analyze it carefully and determine the origin of the flow of spiritual energy, as well as the various changes that occurs with your movements, you'll be able to deduce what kind of formation it is, confirm your current location and find the life gate. And just like that, you'll be able to break out of the formation. After clearing the first stage, the senior didn't proceed straight on to the second stage. Instead, he turned around and explained the various happenings to the duo. He was here to take the 2-star formation master examination. The 1-star examination didn't pose much of a challenge to him anymore, and the only reason he took it was just to give a demonstration to his juniors, as well as to calm their nerves. Yes. The 2 juniors nodded their heads. There wasn't anything wrong with the words of their senior, but the situation was very different when one was trapped in a formation. The surroundings would be completely different, there would be no point of reference, and it would be extremely easy for one to get lost. The most one could do was to analyze the flow of spiritual energy. Determining what kind of formation one was trapped in and where one was positioned within the formation would be extremely difficult. There were more than several thousand types of Grade 1 confinement formation. The same type of formation could be divided into several hundreds of subtypes. If one didn't possess vast understanding of formations, deciphering and escaping from it would be nigh impossible. Alright, I'm going to challenge the second stage now. Regardless of whether I succeed or not, you all should try to look properly and learn from my experience. Saying so, the senior took a deep breath and his gaze turned grave. As a 1-star pinnacle formation master, he was more than confident in clearing the first stage. However, the second stage would be difficult for him. Who? Stepping forward, the formation within the second stage was immediately activated. Just like before, a figure appeared on the wall by the side. Why isn't senior moving at all? Turning their gazes over, the 2 juniors soon realized that the movements of their senior had been peculiar ever since he stepped into the second stage. Previously, he immediately took out the compass and began walking around to analyze the formation. But now, it seemed as though he was in a daze, not moving at all. The white-robed junior suddenly thought of something and asked, "Crap, it couldn't be an illusion formation, could it?" Illusion formation. The green-robed junior's eyes widened in shock. An illusion formation interfered with one's psyche directly. As soon as the formation was triggered, those within would be plunged into a scenario that the formation master had prepared beforehand, leaving them unable to collect themselves. As such, it was more feared than confinement formations. Confinement formations were similar to a cage in the sense that even though one might be unable to escape, one was at least able to retain their thoughts and consciousness. However, in an illusion formation, one's thoughts would be forced to wander, and at that moment, one would forget even one's own name and purpose. Under such circumstances, there wasn't the slightest possibility of escape. Who? Just as the duo was in doubt, the pale face of their senior in the formation gradually grew more and more savage. His Xianxia grew erratic, and he randomly struck out at thin air, as though a lunatic. After a period of time, it seemed like his Xianxia had been fully expended and he spewed a mouthful of blood. Only then did he regain his consciousness and hurriedly crush the jade token in his hand. The mist disappeared and he appeared before his 2 juniors once more. However, this time, his face was withered. The second stage failed. Senior. The senior's confident disposition from before had disappeared without a trace. Instead, As he walked over, he looked like a defeated rooster. His two juniors felt even more flustered. It's normal to fail when challenging the sea of formations. I can only say my luck is bad for having triggered an illusion formation. Swallowing a pill, the senior's complexion improved slightly. Turning to his two juniors, he smiled awkwardly. Indeed, illusion formations are simply too difficult. The green-robed junior said. If only it was a confinement formation, senior would have definitely passed and become a 2-star formation master. The white-robed junior said. Indeed. If it was a confinement formation, I'm confident that I would have cleared the stage. Seeing that the admiration his two juniors had for him didn't falter in the least, the senior heaved a sigh of relief. I've done some research on the matter, and for the past decade, there was a total of 88 challengers for the 2-star formation master examination. Of that, there were 22 times that an illusion formation was triggered, but there wasn't a single person who cleared the stage in those 22 times. Those who cleared the examination were mainly those who faced confinement formation and beguilement formation. What about slaughter formation? Slaughter formation? The senior shook his head. That's even more impossible to clear. A single wrong move would spell death. It is already a blessing if one can survive within it, lest be said, escape from it. It's that difficult. Upon learning how scary slaughter formations were, the two juniors began to tense up once more. Let me tell you honestly, no one has ever succeeded with an illusion formation or a slaughter formation before. Later on, when you enter, as soon as you realize that something is amiss, it's best that you crush the jade token immediately. There's no point struggling needlessly. The senior instructed grimly. Yes. The two juniors nodded their heads. Rest assured, senior. If we encounter an illusion formation or a slaughter formation, we'll give up immediately. Since even you are unable to clear them, how could others possibly succeed? At the very least, I doubt that anyone in this guild would be able to do it. Just as the duo was complimenting their talented senior, at the entrance of the corridor of the Sea of Formations, a young man walked over lazily. The young man looked younger than them, probably below 20. His eyes were reddened with blood vessels, and it looked as though he hadn't slept for several days consecutively. Exhaustion was the only thing one could see from his face. Who is this fellow? Why haven't I seen him before? The trio was taken aback. They had been in the Formation Master Guild for a minimum 5 years by now, and there wasn't a single apprentice or formation master that they didn't recognize. But that young man in front was completely unfamiliar to them. He's probably some apprentice who have just joined. With just one look, it's clear that his mental fortitude is lacking. He probably hasn't slept for several days due to anxiety for the examination. That's why he's in such a state. Indeed. Even his eyes are red. To think that the Sea of Formations could scare someone to this extent. The two juniors sneered. They were embarrassed over their previous anxiety, but this fellow topped them on it. His clothes were unkempt and his posture was slackened. With just one look, it was clear that he hadn't slept for several nights out fear. What's wrong with the guild? Isn't there a limited number of slots every year for those taking the examination? How can a person like him challenge the Sea of Formations as well? The senior frowned as well. Chapter 483. Kick clearing the Sea of Formations would make one an official formation master, but not everyone was qualified to challenge it. One had to make a request beforehand and the guild leader had to approve it personally. After which, it had to be discussed upon during the conference of the elders, and a selection process would be conducted. And on top of that, one had to pay an exorbitant fee as well. Since this fellow was here, he must have obtained an approval beforehand. When did the guild fall to such a level that even a person with such poor mental fortitude could take on the examination as well? It was one thing for him to be deprived of sleep, but more importantly, what that displeased him was the attitude of this fellow when facing the Sea of Formations. There wasn't a single person who came to take the examination that didn't carry fear and respect for it. In a sense, this could be considered as one's respect for the occupation as well. Yet, this fellow was behaving so casually here. Was he that confident in the examination? Disgusted, the senior instructed. Let him go first. You can learn from his counterexample when he fails.
Yes.
The two juniors nodded their head with a gleeful expression on their faces. They didn't carry any doubt that this fellow would definitely fail. The young man who had left the trio speechless was Xianxia, who had rushed here from the library. After reading books for such a long period of time and mastering 2 dans of the Heaven's Path formation art, it would be a miracle if he wasn't slightly withered. Thus, as he walked over to the sea of formations, he adjusted his breathing to rid himself of his fatigue. Before long, he arrived before the trio. Noticing that the gazes of the trio were on him, Xianxia asked them doubtfully, "Are you all here to challenge the sea of formations as well?"
"We're still conditioning ourselves.
If you wish to go first, feel free." Seeing how that fellow didn't carry the slightest respect in his tone when facing an official formation master, the senior flung his sleeves and harumphed.
"Oh,
"Since you all aren't in a hurry, I won't stand on ceremony then." It had been a while since he had arrived at the Formation Master Guild, and Xianxia was in a hurry. Since the other party was willing to allow him to go first, Xianxia chose to not turn the offer down. With a smile, he nodded his head and walked in. To go in without any preparation. Isn't he taking this too lightly? Seeing how the other party didn't try to push the offer or even look at them before rushing straight into the sea of formations, the trio felt as though their vision was spinning. That was the sea of formations. There was no formation master who didn't feel fear for it. To charge right in without even claiming the jade token to stop the formation, wasn't he being too brazen? He's just asking for trouble. Even Senior was unable to clear it easily, and yet this fellow dares to charge in without preparation. What else can this be other than courting death? The green-robed junior harumphed.
indeed.
I bet that he'll be trapped in the first stage. By then, he will understand how fearsome formations are. The white-robed junior smirked.
Wang.
At that moment, the young man walked into the corridor, triggering the formations. A mist slowly rose, shrouding his figure. At the same time, the young man's figure appeared on the wall beside.
Woo woo woo.
Spiritual energy flowed in the surroundings of the young man as though billowing clouds, sealing off his 5 senses entirely, leaving him incapable of discerning directions at all. It's a confinement formation. Given how concentrated the white mist of spiritual energy is and how fast it is flowing, if I'm not mistaken, he must have activated the Cloud Ocean Confinement Formation. The senior recognized the formation. When one was trapped in a formation, one had to use a compass to determine one's location and analyze the spiritual energy flow to determine the type of formation. But when spectating from the outside, one could easily deduce the type of the formation through its physical properties. This was much more efficient and accurate than the former. As the saying goes, it is the passers-by who sees things clearly. Cloud Ocean Confinement Ocean? That is the most complex formation among the Grade 1 formations, and it is the hardest to deal with as well. That formation seals all of one's senses, leaving one unable to determine anything at all. Even if one could use a compass to discern one's location, if one can't accurately decipher the formation, it'll be hard to escape from it. They didn't expect this fellow's luck to be that bad. To think that he would meet with such a formidable confinement formation as soon as he entered. The two juniors shook their heads in sympathy. Even if he was lacking in capability, if he were to meet with an easy formation, he might still be able to clear it. However, having encountered such a formidable confinement formation, he could only raise his hands to surrender. See, even if you meet with a confinement formation, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can break out of it. Thus, you must be on your toes at all times and, by no means, should you underestimate the formation you are in. You mustn't be like this arrogant and ignorant fellow. He's just looking for trouble. Seeing how that fellow inside didn't even bother taking out a compass, the senior shook his head, turned to his two juniors, and advised them. However, before he could finish his words, his two juniors widened their eyes simultaneously, and their faces starting twitching violently. What's wrong? Seeing the two of them lose their composure, the senior frowned. Teacher has already told you that before challenging the sea of formations, you must focus your attention and avoid getting arrogant or anxious. Look at what state you are in. How do you expect to succeed like that?
That's not it, senior.
Look. With a reddened face, the green-robed junior hurriedly pointed to the front. What's there to make a fuss about? Isn't he just trapped in the confinement formation? Don't worry, if he isn't out within 2 hours, the formation will dispel itself automatically. This is just a confinement formation, his life isn't at risk. Harumphing, the senior turned around and his latter words immediately jammed in his throat. His body stiffened and his lower jaw fell to the ground. What? He thought that what he would see was a helpless young man trapped in a confinement formation, but contrary to his expectation, the young man was standing quietly not too far away, shaking his head calmly. And the mist that had shrouded around him had disappeared without a trace. In other words, the cloud ocean confinement formation which had left him fearful had already been broken. To stop the formation entirely. I thought you wouldn't be able to overcome it. Even if you have the capability to do so, surely you don't have to be so fast? You didn't even bother taking out the compass or discern the flow of spiritual energy. And yet, in the time that I was lecturing my 2 juniors, the formation was already gone. Do you need to be so extreme? What just happened? Frenzied, the senior hurriedly asked. We also didn't see it carefully. We only saw him kicking the formation. Then, it simply disappeared, the green-robed junior said. It disappeared with a kick. What in the world are you talking about? The senior's face darkened. I'm asking you how the other party overcame the formation, and you're telling me that he kicked it? Kick your head. Do you think that a formation is a living being that will stop with a single kick? If that is true, then we, formation masters, would have long gone out of business. This occupation wouldn't have been the dreams and fears of so many people. It was really just a kick. With his mouth twitching violently, the green-robed junior protested. He was already nearly on the verge of tears. He had seen with his own eyes that the other party sent a kick at the formation and it immediately stopped. But how could a Grade 1 pinnacle cloud ocean confinement formation be broken so easily? It was indeed just one kick. The white-robed junior nodded his head in a daze. Even he saw it, I'm not mistaken. Upon seeing his fellow peer confirming his words, the green-robed junior ascertained that he wasn't insane and hurriedly nodded his head. Kick. The senior felt frenzied. Your heads must be the one that was kicked for you all to say such ridiculous words. Formations are intangible. Do you think it makes sense for them to be kicked? Enough. Regardless of whatever method he used, it's just the first stage, so it's still within an acceptable difficulty range. I don't think he'll be able to do it as easily for the latter stages. Seeing that his 2 juniors were getting incoherent, the senior waved his hands and looked at the young man in front intently. Since he missed it previously, he was determined not to miss the other party's actions this time. He had to get to the bottom of the matter and see what method that fellow used to break out of the formation. After all, it hadn't been too long since his juniors started learning about formations. It was possible that they were deceived by some bizarre method used by the other party, thus missing the true way. Who? Thus, he gathered his attention to look at the young man. As expected, the young man who just escaped from the cloud ocean confinement formation didn't just stop right there. He proceeded on to the next stage. Wang. Soon, he came into contact with the formations of the second stage and a white mist rose up, shrouding the young man once more. It's an illusion formation. The senior narrowed his eyes. After being plunged into an illusion formation a moment ago, he was already rather fearful of it. Judging from the type of mist and the movement of the spiritual energy, he immediately deduced that the fellow had met with one, and from the looks of it, it didn't seem at all inferior to the illusion formation he encountered previously. Illusion formation. His 2 juniors were stunned. Sympathy immediately appeared on their faces. Honestly speaking, this fellow was truly unlucky. He met with such a formidable confinement formation in his very first stage, so they thought that perhaps his luck might be better in the second stage. Yet, he met with the illusion formation which their senior failed at. That's right. In the formation, the clear air is rising while the turbid air is sinking. The collision of the two produces a unique moaning sound which will cause those hearing it to suffer from hallucinations. That was precisely how I unwittingly fell under the illusion previously, the senior said with a grim expression. Even now, when he recalled the experience from before, he couldn't help but feel fearful. As soon as he stepped into the formation, before he could even react, the unique sound reached his ear and assaulted his psyche, causing his consciousness to become fuzzy. For a moment, he was completely helpless and defenseless. If not for his body being jolted due to the depletion of his Xianxia, he would have probably been unable to pull himself out from the illusions. It's that fearsome. The white-robed junior narrowed his eyes. Doesn't that mean that he has no chance of succeeding at all? Breaking out of an illusion formation requires one to have high mental fortitude. If one's mental fortitude doesn't reach a certain level, it'll be very difficult to escape from it. Given how he isn't even 20, even if he started cultivating from a very young age, how strong can his mental fortitude be? Even I have failed, less be said, him. The senior shook his head. He didn't see how that fellow had passed, but it showed that the other party possessed a certain level of aptitude in formations. However, illusion formations were simply too difficult. It wasn't just about one's comprehension of formations. More importantly, it was about one's mental fortitude. If one couldn't maintain a calm and impervious mind, it was very easy to get confused and lost, thus resulting in one's inability to pull out from the illusions. In order to deal with illusions, he had undergone tough training for countless months, but even so, he still failed in an instant. He found it hard to believe that a young lad who wasn't even 20 yet could do better than him. Look, he's starting to kick around randomly as well. The heck? Previously, when he succumbed to the illusion formation, he also began striking out randomly. This fellow was starting to show the same symptoms as well. However, before he could finish his words, his body suddenly trembled violently. As soon as the young man's leg kicked out, the corridor, which was filled with mist, suddenly cleared up. The formation had been broken again. Chapter 484. Kick 2 in 1. That was a grade 2 illusion formation. When he was within it, he found it hard to even discern reality from illusion. That was how fearsome it was. And yet, this fellow's random kick actually cleared away the formation. Are you messing with me? He had said that the junior's claim that the other party had broken through the formation with a single kick was nonsense previously, but this time, he had witnessed it personally. With a single kick, the illusion formation came to a halt. The overwhelming incongruity between reality and expectations left him on the verge of going mad. Possessing outstanding aptitude in formations, he had always been envied by his fellow classmates, and he managed to become a one-star formation master at a very young age. After driving himself to the core for many years to toughen up his mental fortitude, he still ended up losing himself as soon as he stepped into a grade 2 illusion formation. Yet, this fellow simply did a single kick, and the formation came to a halt. Did reality have to be so harsh? Did you collude with the formation to pull one over us? While he was on the verge of a mental breakdown, the anxious voice of the green-robed junior beside him sounded. Senior, do you think that it's calculated, or is he simply just randomly kicking around? Randomly kicking around? Have you seen anyone successfully breaking out of a formation by randomly kicking around? The senior's mouth twitched as his vision turned dark. He had seen people randomly kicking around to incapacitate an opponent. He had also seen people randomly kicking around and causing damage to their meridians, but he had never ever heard of a person destroying a formation with just a single kick. Formations were positioned to be aligned with the essence of the world. They were an unsubstantial existence, reminiscent to one's environment. Have you seen anyone destroying their environment through a kick? Thus, it was impossible for this kick to be of random nature. It was a purposeful, well thought out, responsible, and decisive kick. It was a kick made after seeing through the facade, peering into the very essence, and determining the fundamental flaws. Otherwise, how could a single kick break a formation? It was intentional. Then, how strong must his grasp of formations be? The white-robed junior's lips went dry. Even teacher would find it hard to do the same. Their teacher was a famous 4-star formation master even within the guild, but even he was incapable of breaking a formation so easily. I have no idea either. However, as long as he continues attempting the examination, we might be able to see through something, the senior said, suppressing his shock. There was a limit to his eye of discernment, and as such, he failed to understand how the other party broke the formation. However, if he were to continue analyzing the other party's action, he might be able to notice something. Perhaps, he might even be able to learn a thing or two from the other party, and in the future, when meeting these types of formation, he would be able to break them easily. Continues attempting the examination? You mean that he would challenge the third stage? Given how easily he broke through a grade 2 illusion formation, he must be at least a 3-star formation master. Naturally, there's no reason for him to stop here. That's true. The trio hurriedly turned their gazes forward. Indeed, just like what they guessed, that exhausted-looking young man who seemed as though he would crumble at any moment continued advancing forward after clearing that illusion formation. At grade 3, a formation will require more than spiritual energy from the surroundings to drive it. Often, spirit stones will be placed at the formation core to power it. As such, the might of grade 3 formations is many times greater than that of grade 2, and with greater energy, there is more flexibility in the design as well. He won't be able to clear it as easily as he did before, the senior said gravely. All formations, regardless of the type or design, required energy to drive it. It was just like how cows eat grass and humans eat rice to move. There was nothing that could move without energy fueling it. As grade 1 and grade 2 formations were of low tier, they could be driven just by the absorbing spiritual energy from the surroundings. However, it was impossible for grade 3 formation to do the same. Even though formations could absorb spiritual energy from the surroundings, a grade 3 formation would still require an accumulation of several months before it could be used once. Taking the Great Xianxia formation for example, it had gathered an immense amount of energy over 1,000 years, but it was sapped dry just with a single usage. As the Sea of Formations was the examination criteria for formation masters in Honghai City, there were innumerable people who were waiting to challenge it every year. They couldn't expect it to recharge itself just by absorbing spiritual energy from the surroundings. Thus, often, spirit stones would be placed at the formation core to drive it. With energy from the spirit stones, the formations would be able to display much greater might than what they were normally capable of, thus making them harder to escape from. This young man had managed to overcome grade 1 and grade 2 formations easily, but in face of a grade 3 formation powered by spirit stones, he probably wouldn't be able to overcome it as easily as before. Who? In the short time which the trio spent chatting, the grade 3 formation was triggered and the young man suddenly disappeared amidst a white veil. In an instant, the figure on the wall seemed to have fallen into a treacherous trap. Descending flower petals alongside sharp glints of aura filled the surroundings, creating an extremely bizarre sight. The descending flower petals and sharp spiritual energy. Could this be the Qinghong falling petal formation? The senior's lips quivered and he nearly fell to the ground from shock. Qinghong falling petal formation? What kind of formation is that? The two juniors turned to look at him. They were only apprentices and they were here for the 1-star formation master examination. As such, they weren't well versed in some of the higher tiered formations. It's a slaughter formation. The senior's voice quivered. Slaughter formation. The two juniors shuddered and they nearly bit their tongues from shock. Of all the formations, illusion formation and slaughter formation were the most feared of all. Yet, this fellow managed to meet with the both of them. Wasn't his luck a little too bad? Illusion formations were already an exceedingly scary adversary, even their senior was almost unable to free himself from it, so one can imagine how frightening slaughter formations are. This fellow didn't take the jade token before taking the examination. He couldn't possibly die inside, right? Suppressing his shock, the white-robed junior asked, "Is this slaughter formation formidable?" The Qinghong falling petal formation is a grade 3 pinnacle slaughter formation. It's said to be created by a man named Shen Qinghong 1,500 years ago. The entire ground serves as a trap in itself, leaving one with nowhere to escape to. One will find himself dying tragically in the beautiful scenery. This formation has once killed a transcendent mortal 2-dan expert, and it's known as the strongest among grade 3 formations. Could anyone say it's not formidable? It was hard to tell whether the senior was nervous or scared, but his voice was slightly hoarse. Killed a transcendent mortal 2-dan expert? This is already comparable to a grade 4 formation. The duo's eyes went wide in shock. Grade 1 formations were capable of killing Tongxian realm cultivators. Grade 2 formations were capable of eliminating Xianxia realm cultivators. Grade 3 formations were capable of subduing Xizuan realm, half-transcension, and even prolonged longevity cultivators. And this slaughter formation actually managed to kill a transcendent mortal 2 Dan. That was already comparable to the strength of some grade 4 formations. This formation wasn't to be trifled with. Even though they were hearing it with their own ears, they still found it hard to believe. The green-robed junior couldn't help but ask, then, will he meet with any danger? That'll be hard to say. It'll depend on his strength and his defensive measures. If he has nothing up his sleeves, only one conclusion remains for him: death. Shaking his head, the senior was about to continue speaking when he frowned. Look, the formation is getting into action now. As he said those words, the sharp glints made of spiritual energy suddenly showed their ferocious side. As though arrows, they suddenly shot toward the young man from all directions. The might of every single glint was fearsome. Even a Xizuan realm expert would be easily impaled by them. It depends on how he deals with the situation now. If I were in his position, I would try to dodge those glints before looking for a plausible escape route. Putting himself in the other party's shoes, the senior began to analyze how the other party could escape from this calamity. But at that moment, that ordinary leg was lifted up once again. Who? Facing the rain of flower petals, he kicked. Isn't that courting death? Seeing that the fellow was still using the same move, the trio was frenzied. There were no threats on his life in a confinement formation and illusion formation, so his attempt to stop the formation with a kick could still be overlooked. However, this was a slaughter formation. Every single glint was a small dagger threatening to reap his life. There was no one who could possibly withstand their assault. And yet, he was kicking against them with his leg. May I ask, what in the world are you thinking? Frenzied, they were thinking that even if this fellow didn't die, his legs would also be sliced into innumerable pieces when the entire formation suddenly froze. Who? With a buzzing sound, the sharp glints in the air suddenly dissipated. The incomparably powerful formation, which would tear the young man apart at any moment, suddenly faded away as though snow melting in the presence of spring. The young man's figure appeared before the crowd once more. He broke the formation. He succeeded again. The trio looked at one another and they could see the disbelief in their eyes. For a moment, it felt as though they were struck by a bolt of lightning. He broke the formation with a kick once again. What in the world is going on? The senior's body twitched. He felt a stifling sensation on his chest which made it hard for him to breathe. He thought that the other party had simply acted too quickly for him to properly discern what had happened, and as long as he could see it again, he would surely be able to determine the technique the other party used to break the formation and learn a thing or two from him. But from the looks of it now, it seemed like he was overthinking it. Breaking a formation with a kick. It was futile no matter how many times he saw such an eccentric move. How was he supposed to learn that? It's not over yet. Look. Am I mistaken, or does it seem like he's going to challenge the 4th stage? The green-robed junior asked. Hearing those words, the other two immediately turned their gazes over. The young man who had just appeared in their sights shook his head, as though lamenting the formation's weakness, and started walking toward the 4th stage. If he were to pass the 4th stage, it would mean that he would be qualified as a 4-star formation master. A fellow who wasn't even 20 yet becoming a 4-star formation master? Who was the one who said that he wouldn't even pass the 1st stage? Who was the one who looked down on him just now? The trio felt their body stiffened, and they were on the verge of going mad. While the trio was about to lose their sanity, outside the corridor where the Sea of Formations was located, 4 incense sticks were lit in an incense pot. The smoke danced in the air, creating a tranquil atmosphere. Guild leader Zheng, what do you mean by that? You know that my 3 students are challenging the Sea of Formations today, and yet you still allowed that fellow to enter. Is this a personal attack? In front of the incense pot, a white-bearded elder lashed out furiously. 4-star Formation Master Wang Haoshuan, an elder of the Formation Master Guild. He was the teacher of the senior and juniors in the corridor. His 3 students were challenging the Sea of Formations today. This was something that had been decided upon 1 month ago. And yet, The guild leader simply came over and insisted on slotting someone in. He thought that the other party would be slotting his student, Xiaowu, in, as that fellow seemed ready to take on the 3-star formation master examination already. Yet, it turned out to be a young lad whom he had never even met before. Even if he didn't meet the other party before, if the other party possessed true capability, he would have nothing to say. However, look at that casual and lazy attitude. The other party seemed like he would fall asleep at any moment. Such a person was qualified to challenge the sea of formations as well. If he were to succeed, it wouldn't be too long before the sun starts rising from the west. Elder Wang, there's no need to be so infuriated. It'll help your students if another person were to challenge the sea of formations as well. Guild leader Zhang shook his head. If he is able to pass, that will of course be something good. However, look at his attitude. Do you think that he'll be able to pass? If he were to fail, won't he simply cause additional stress to my students? If they were to lose their composure, how are they supposed to take the examination? Wang Haoshuan harumphed. Challenging the sea of formation wasn't just about one's understanding of formations and skills. Mental fortitude also played an extremely important role. Otherwise, if one were to meet with an illusion formation, one would lose one's composure swiftly, and this could potentially result in failure. If those who challenged the examination along with them were to produce good results, it could serve as an encouragement for his own students to do well. But on the contrary, if the results were poor, it might leave his students feeling apprehensive, and this would prevent them from doing well. Don't worry. The reason why I slotted him into the examination is because I am confident in his ability. There's no need to worry. While consoling the other party, the fire on the first incense stick suddenly flickered and extinguished. This incense stick was known as the incense of the formation sea. It was forged alongside the sea of formations, and it would light itself as soon as someone challenged it. It would take exactly 2 hours for each incense stick to burn all the way down. If the incense doesn't extinguish by itself during this period of time, it would mean that the challenger had failed to clear the stage and vice versa. If the fire on the incense stick were to extinguish, the formation inside would automatically shut down. This was the reason why the senior said that even if one were to be trapped in the formation, there was nothing to worry about. Thus, the incense of the formation sea served both as a timer and a switch. The 4 incense sticks represented the 4 stages in the sea of formations respectively. Since the fire on the first incense stick was extinguished, it meant that someone had cleared the first stage. How about it? He has successfully passed the first stage. What else do you have to say? Upon seeing the sight, guild leader Zhang chuckled. My students entered much earlier than him. Who knows, what if one of them is the one challenging the examination? Wang Haoshuan harumphed. Even though the extinguishing of the incense stick's fire meant that someone had successfully cleared the stage, there was no way of telling who it was. It had only been around 2 minutes since that fellow who was on the verge of knocking out had only just entered, so how could it be him? It must be his students. That is possible as well. Taken aback, guild leader Zhang soon nodded his head in agreement. Even though he had witnessed Xianxia's astonishing speed in setting up formations, he had no idea about his ability in breaking formations, so he didn't dare to jump into conclusions. Even though the first stage was just a grade 1 formation, he knew that even he would be unable to clear it so swiftly. Thus, he also found it hard to accept that Xianxia was the one who cleared the challenge. Since it's your student who cleared the stage, there's even less need for you to worry. Shaking his head, guild leader Zhang smiled. However, before he could finish his words, the fire on the second incense stick flickered and abruptly extinguished. The second stage has been cleared. Shocked. It hadn't even been a minute since the first stage was cleared, and the second stage was already cleared? How could anyone be that fast? With a perplexed expression, guild leader Zheng asked, "This is your student?" Wang Haoshuan's face froze. He knew the capability of his students very well. It would at least take 10 to 20 minutes or even longer for them to clear a single stage. To break out of a formation in less than a minute. That was way too fast. Catcher! Just as they were overwhelmed with shock, they saw the fire of the third incense stick flicker and extinguish. The third stage has been cleared as well. Wang Haoshuan nearly burst into tears. No matter how great his expectations for his students were, he knew that this was an impossible feat for the three of them. Of those three, one was intending to take on the 2-star Formation Master examination while the other two was challenging the 1-star examination. Since the one challenging the examination cleared even the 3rd stage so swiftly, it could only mean that it was someone else. It's that fellow from before. With widened eyes, Wang Haoshuan exchanged glances with guild leader Zheng, and the two of them fell into a frenzy. They weren't surprised by the other party's feat of clearing the 3rd stage, but that he was simply too fast. They could still accept it if the other party was able to clear the 1st and 2nd stage easily. However, the formations in the 3rd stage were driven by spirit stones, and even they would be slightly troubled to break out of them. To do it so quickly, how in the world did he accomplish it? Since he cleared the 3 stages so quickly, do you think he'll pass the 4th one as well? Recovering from the shock, the group immediately turned their eyes onto the final incense stick. This incense stick represented the 4th stage, as well as a grade 4 formation. If the other party succeeded in clearing the 4th stage as well, that would truly be fearsome. A 4-star Formation Master who wasn't even 20 yet? More importantly, for him to break out of all those formations so swiftly, exactly how deep was his understanding of formations? This was something they dared not imagine in the past. Wang! Just as they were harboring such thoughts, the fire on the 4th incense stick suddenly flickered, and for a moment, it looked as though it would extinguish at any moment. However, in the end, it stabilized and was reignited again. It didn't extinguish. It seems like that fellow didn't pass the 4th stage. I guess it's to be expected. After all, grade 4 formations aren't that easy to overcome. Seeing the flame on the 4th incense stick, it was clear that the person inside had failed to clear the challenge. Thus, Wang Haoshuan shook his head. The speed at which that fellow had cleared the stages had frightened him. He thought that the other party might be able to clear a grade 4 formation easily as well. However, from the looks of it, the other party hadn't reached such a level yet. But that was to be expected. After all, even he couldn't guarantee that he could break every single kind of grade 4 formation. Needless to say, a young fellow who wasn't even 20 yet. If he were to succeed, that would be truly a miracle. But in any case, it is already formidable for him to become a 3-star Formation Master in his first examination. Guild leader Zheng was slightly disappointed. From the speed and acuity at which that fellow set up the grade 2 spirit gathering formation, he thought that the other party's comprehension of formations wasn't beneath him. But it seemed like there was still some disparity between them after all. Even so, given how he was able to reach 3-star at such a young age, as long as he were to work hard, it would just be a matter of time before he becomes a 4-star or even 5-star Formation Master. He didn't clear the 4th stage? Seems like Xianxia isn't omnipotent as well. Hall Master Sai stood behind the duo. After seeing that the 4th incense stick wasn't extinguished, he shook his head as well. He thought that this fellow would cause a great chaos in the midst of challenging the sea of formations, just like how the other party did when he challenged the harmonious stream of flowing goblets. However, it seemed like he was just worrying excessively. At his age, it was already extremely incredible for the other party to be a master teacher and a 5-star appraiser. If the other party were to be a 4-star Formation Master on top of that, he might have to start doubting the meaning of life already. Heaving a sigh of relief, he was just about to go to the corridor to wait for the young man when the ground suddenly shook. Hong long long. The sound of a millstone being turned reverberated in the air as though an earthquake. What happened? A grave expression immediately appeared on everyone's faces, and even guild leader Zheng's eyebrows were knitted together. The group started looking around warily. Who? Suddenly, the warmth in the room vanished and a bone-chilling breeze of air blew in. Catcher! At that moment, the flame on the 4th incense stick suddenly extinguished. And soon afterward, with a crisp sound, the pot cracked open. This. The guild's eternal spring formation, which is sustaining the sea of formations, has been broken. Upon realizing something, guild leader Zheng's vision darkened and he nearly spurted a mouthful of blood. Given that there were innumerable formations in the sea of formations, naturally, a larger formation had to be set up to control and manage them. And this formation happened to be the eternal spring formation, which regulated the interior conditions of the Formation Master Guild. Since the warmth had suddenly disappeared from the air and the incense pot suddenly cracked, there could only be one possibility. That was that the formation had been stopped. In other words, someone had broken it. But that was a grade 5 formation. Back then, the headquarters had specially sent an expert down here to set it up. Who could be possibly of achieving such a feat? In an instant, a frenzied expression appeared on everyone's faces. Could it be Xianxia? With trembling bodies, a thought suddenly popped in Guild Leader Zhang and Hall Master Sai's minds. The core of the formation was located in the depths of the Sea of Formations. At the current moment, that fellow, who was challenging the 4th stage of the Sea of Formations, was the closest to it. Other than him, they couldn't think of any other culprit. But if it was really him, how in the world did he manage to stop the formation? Guild Leader Zheng had a dazed expression on his face. There were specific tricks to breaking a formation. What kind of trick did the other party use to be able to clear the stages so quickly, going to the extent as to be able to break even a grade 5 formation? Just as the group was overwhelmed with shock, a few figures walked out from the corridor. They were the 3 students who were supposed to challenge the Sea of Formations. Given that the formation operating the corridor had been broken, there was no way for the examination to continue on. Thus, there was no point for them to remain there, and so they came out. What happened? Wang Haoshuan walked up and asked. That person who just entered broke all of the formations. The senior shuddered as he spoke. Broke all of the formations? So fast? Guild Leader Zheng walked forward and asked, how did he do it? Did he use Grandmaster Hong Bei's Celestial Chasing Formation Breaking Art, Grandmaster Nan Yang's Energy Seeking Formation Breaking Art, or the 5-element Formation Master Senior Sai Yang's Force Accruing Formation Breaking Art? Of all techniques I know, only these 3 can achieve such speed. Guild Leader. Seeing that the most authoritative person in the entire guild was questioning him personally, the senior was taken aback and his face paled. Reporting to the guild leader, he didn't use any of the 3 techniques. He didn't? Then what technique did he use? To the extent of my knowledge, these 3 are already the strongest and most formidable formation breaking techniques already. Guild Leader Zheng frowned. Were there even stronger techniques that he was unaware of? What he used was... The senior's face distorted in frenzy and disbelief. A kick. Chapter 485. Quasi 4-star Formation Master a kick. Guild Leader Zhang and Wang Haoshuan were taken aback. They were baffled. What kind of formation breaking technique was called a kick? That's right. From the 1st stage to the 4th stage, before all of the formations, he simply kicked, and then, the formation simply stopped, the senior said. A kick each. You mean that he used a kick to break the formation? Guild Leader Zhang and Wang Haoshuan nearly spewed blood. Yes. The senior nodded his head. The 2 great 4-star formation masters stared at one another. Yes? Yes, your head. What kind of formation breaking technique is that? Do you think that makes sense? Senior is right. He simply kicked each of them to overcome the formations. The both of us saw it ourselves too. Seeing the disbelief in the guild leader and their teacher's eyes, the 2 juniors immediately stepped forward to testify. Could it be that he was lucky such that the formations he met were some of the more basic and simpler? Since there were 3 people saying the same words, Wang Haoshuan knew that it was unlikely to be a lie. Thus, he tried asking from another perspective. In the Sea of Formations, the formation 1 triggered was completely random, and so, luck played an important role in the examination. For the other party to pass all 4 stages so swiftly, could he have met with the weakest formations of each grade? Lucky. The trio's mouths twitched. We've never met a person who is as unlucky as he is. In the 1st stage, he encountered the Cloud Ocean Confinement Formation. In the 2nd, an Illusion Formation. In the 3rd, the Qinghong Falling Petal Formation. Cloud Ocean Confinement Formation? Illusion Formation. Qinghong Falling Petal Formation. Just by hearing the formations the other party encountered in the first 3 stages, the 2 4-star formation masters nearly fell to the ground. Those were formations unparalleled in their respective grade. For a person to meet all of them in a single examination. Are you for real? How unlucky must one be for that to happen? More importantly, even though he met with those formations, he still managed to clear the stages so quickly. He even went to the extent of breaking the great formation sustaining the guild. What was the formation for the fourth stage then? Guild leader Zheng hurriedly asked. Could the formation for the fourth stage be relatively easier? If I'm not wrong, it seemed to be the Drunken Heart Beguilement Slaughter Formation, the senior said. Drunken Heart Beguilement Slaughter Formation. The Grade 4 Pinnacle Formation which fuses Beguilement Formation and Slaughter Formation together. Guild leader Zhang exclaimed in shock. He thought that after the fellow was unlucky for the first 3 stages, his luck might get better in the fourth one. Who knew that he would meet with the worst of the lot? That was definitely the most fearsome formation within the sea of formations. Ordinary formations only took on one type. They were either Illusion Formation, Slaughter Formation, Beguilement Formation, or Confinement Formation. Under normal circumstances, there would be no overlap between the two. But this formation had complemented the two together in a very profound manner. In other words, if one were to be trapped in it, one would first be beguiled before being slaughtered. Even guild leader Zheng had to admit that it would be difficult for him to survive if he were trapped in it. Yet, not only was the other party fine, he even broke the formation and went ahead to get rid of the guild's main formation. Did you have to be so extreme? Indeed. After stepping into the formation, his eyes were dazed for a moment, so I thought that his mind might have succumbed to the formation. But in the end, with 2 consecutive kicks, the Drunken Heart Beguilement Slaughter Formation broke down, and soon afterward, the great formation of the guild was stopped as well. Seeing that there was no way for the examination to continue on, we decided to just step out of the corridor. The senior explained. A Grade 4 Pinnacle Formation and a Grade 5 Formation can be broken with a single kick. Guild leader Zhang and Wang Haoshuan felt as though their worldly horizons were crumbling down. By the side, Hall Master Sai slapped his forehead. He thought that Xianxia would at least a little more reasonable here. But it seemed like he was too naive. That fellow was just intent on causing trouble wherever he went. While the crowd was overwhelmed with shock, the main character of the entire saga walked out from the corridor. In truth, the current Xianxia was slightly nervous. The first 3 stages were extremely easy to him. Even without using the Library of Heaven's Path, with just a glance using the Eye of Insight, he could easily find the core of the formation and kick them to a stop. However, the final stage wasn't that easy. A Grade 4 Pinnacle Beguilement and Slaughter Formation. If not for his soul depth having reached 12.0, the level equivalent to a 4-star master teacher, he would have surely lost his ability to think rationally as soon as he stepped in and died from the formation. At the crucial moment, he activated the strength of the Library of Heaven's Path and found a few flaws. Knowing that it was too dangerous then, he didn't have the time to analyze the consequences of his actions, so he immediately kicked the 2 formations to a halt. Seems like it'll be best for me not to trifle with Grade 4 formations in the future. Remembering the previous experience, Xianxia still felt a little fearful. If not for his high soul depth, he would have been dead by now. Since even a Grade 4 formation was that scary, it was difficult to imagine how fearsome the higher-tiered ones were. Xianxia thought that formations were nothing but a decoration to him, especially since he could determine their flaws via the Eye of Insight and Library of Heaven's Path. However, he had just realized that his thinking was too naive. The truly formidable formations would kill one before one could even react. No matter how capable one was and how many flaws in the formation one knew of, it would be for naught. Xianxia, you managed to break through all of the formations. Just as Xianxia was preparing himself, he saw Guild Leader Zhang and Hall Master Sai walking over with a look of awe. I only stopped them temporarily. Xianxia shook his head. Breaking a formation meant destroying the formation core. Under such circumstances, it would be difficult for the formation to work again. On the other hand, stopping a formation was different. A formation which had its operation stopped was just a formation that had been switched off. One could still reactivate it after that. To summarize, It was just the difference of whether the formation core had been destroyed or not. Breaking a formation meant destroying the entire formation, while stopping a formation meant using a unique method to stop its operation. Even though the effects were similar on the surface, there was a huge difference between the two. Stop. Hearing those words, guild leader Zhang and the others heaved a long sigh of relief. If he had really destroyed the Sea of Formation's strongest grade 4 formation and the guild's main formation, then he, as the guild leader, would surely be held accountable. After explaining the matter, Xianxia asked, "Since I've managed to clear the Sea of Formations, can I be considered as an official formation master now? May I know what cultivation realm is Xianxia at?" Guild leader Zheng asked. "I'm at half Transcension. However, I should be able to reach Transcendent Mortal 1 Dan within the next 2 days." Xianxia replied. Having compiled the Transcendent Mortal 1 Dan of the Heaven's Path Divine Art, as long as he managed to find a spirit gathering formation, he should be able to achieve a breakthrough very quickly. One has to possess at least the strength of a Transcendent Mortal 3 Dan to apply for the rank of a 4-star formation master. Your cultivation is still lacking. Guild leader Zheng frowned. Just as he had deduced before, the young man before him hadn't even reached the Transcendent Mortal realm yet. Bestowing him the rank of a 4-star formation master wasn't quite possible. As one of the occupations of the upper 9 paths, one of the promotion criteria involved one's level of cultivation. Without a sufficiently high cultivation realm to match up with the rank, it wasn't possible for the rank to be bestowed to one. A moment later, guild leader Zhang said, "How about this? Xianxia, I'll give you a quasi 4-star formation master emblem for the time being. At the same time, I'll report the matter to the headquarter, and if they give their approval, there will be no problems giving you the rank of a 4-star formation master. But even if they do not approve the request, given your talents, you should be able to easily reach Transcendent Mortal 3 Dan before 30. By then, you will be automatically given the rank without having to take the examination again." Quasi 4-star formation master. Xianxia was perplexed. There was such a rank. Indeed. This is how the guild deals with individuals who are able to pass the 4-star formation master examination when their cultivation hasn't reached the required level yet. It's the same for most guilds as well. There are some occupations that don't have a requirement on one's cultivation realm and an emblem is bestowed straight after the candidate passes the examination, but those number in the minority, guild leader Zheng said. Take the appraiser occupation for example. Right after Xianxia passed the examination, he was given a 5-star emblem. Quasi 4-star formation master works for me too. Then, can you give me the formation blueprint, flag, and core of a grade 4 spirit gathering formation? The main reason why he took the formation master examination was for this. Since he was already a quasi 4-star formation master, he should be qualified to obtain them.
Wait un moment.
Seeing that the other party was asking for the items, guild leader Zhang shook his head with a bitter smile. He turned around to instruct Xiaowu and the latter left the room. Not too long later, the latter returned with a jade token, formation core, and flag in hand. This is the formation blueprint for a grade 4 spirit gathering formation. You can record it down but make sure not to leak it out. Saying so, guild leader Zhang passed the jade token over. Nodding his head, Xianxia took the jade token and immersed his consciousness into it. A formation blueprint appeared in his mind, and it even described the various ways of setting it up when on the differing geographical terrain. Wait, this spirit gathering formation can only extract spiritual energy from 10 spirit stones at once. After reading the content and the introduction within, Xianxia's expression showed slight disappointment. The spirit gathering formation was formidable, but it could only extract spiritual energy from 10 spirit stones at once. 10 was a huge number for others, but to Xianxia, it was far too insufficient. A single spirit stone would break within 2 breaths of his cultivation. Even though 10 spirit stones could sustain him for a little longer, all in all, it was only 20 breaths. That wasn't really much of a difference from before. In the end, he still had to keep switching spirit stones in the formation while attempting to achieve a breakthrough in his cultivation. To be capable of extracting spiritual energy from 10 spirit stone at once, this is already the most efficient spirit gathering formation in our guild. It is enough to sustain even the cultivation of a transcendent mortal 4-dan expert. Is it still insufficient for Xianxia? Guild leader Zhang frowned. A grade 4 spirit gathering formation could already be considered as top-notch within Myriad Kingdom Alliance. If one's cultivation hadn't reached the corresponding level, it would be very hard to set it up. If the other party still thought that it was insufficient, there was nothing he could do about it. After hesitating for a moment, Xianxia carefully asked, "Is there a formation which can extract the spiritual energy from all of the spirit stones placed within, regardless of the quantity?" He needed to expend an ocean worth of spirit stone to reach transcendent mortal 1-dan. If he could only use 10 of them at once, he would surely waste a lot of time. It would be best if he could put in all of the required spirit stones at a single go. In this way, he could focus his attention on cultivating. It was just like the petrol tank of a car. If it was the size of a teacup, regardless of how many petrol stations there were on the way, one would be terribly inconvenienced. On the other hand, it would be much convenient if it was the size of a fish tank. No limits on the quantity. Guild leader Zhang's mouth twitched. There is one but, that is a grade 5 spirit gathering formation. Furthermore, I only have the formation blueprint. I don't have the formation flags and core. In Honghai City Formation Guild, the highest rank formation master, guild leader Zhang, was only at 4-star pinnacle. He wasn't capable of preparing a grade 5 formation so naturally, he didn't possess the materials required to set it up. Besides, these items were exorbitant, and if one's rank hadn't reached the level yet, it would be difficult to obtain the items. Only the formation blueprint. A deep frown was etched on Xianxia's forehead. He'd spent the entire day reading books and taking the formation master examination. Did he really have no choice but to accept this insignificant spirit gathering formation and cultivate slowly? If that was really the case, then it was really darned. Chapter 486, Imperial Jade Sword acknowledging its master indeed. Guild leader Zhang nodded his head. This formation blueprint was left behind by a 5-star formation master back when the branch was first built. Otherwise, as a 4-star branch, even if we were to apply for a grade 5 formation blueprint from the headquarters, we might not necessarily be able to obtain it. The formation blueprints in the Formation Master Guild was as strictly regulated as the pill formulae in the Apothecary Guild. One was only allowed to access resources corresponding to one's current level. If one were to come into contact with advanced topics when one's capability hadn't reached the required level, it would only harm oneself. As such, 4-star branches like the Honghai City Formation Guild was only qualified to collect grade 4 formation blueprints. If one wanted to access higher grade formation blueprints, one had to apply it from the headquarters and pay a certain price. Besides, this was only limited to the more basic grade 5 formation blueprints. As for the more profound materials, one would only have access to it when visiting a higher tiered branch. Given how just the formation blueprint was so tightly regulated already, no more needed to be said about formation core and flags. Do I really have to head to higher ranked Formation Master Guild? What in the world was this? He spent an entire day here and it turned out that even though there was a grade 5 formation blueprint here, there wasn't formation flags and core to set it up. Was he supposed to build it out of thin air? The higher the grade of a formation, the higher the demand of the quality of the two items. These were fundamental needs, so there was no compromising over them. Was he supposed to head to the Blacksmith Guild to learn how to forge these items just over a spirit gathering formation? Putting aside how it would take up a lot of time, the Honghai City Blacksmith Guild might, due to its limited rank, be unable to access the corresponding information required, just like the Formation Master Guild. Besides, even if he could find the respective blueprints for the formation flag and core, it wasn't guaranteed whether he could find the required material for it to forge them. Rubbing his glabella, Xianxia was distressed. He thought that buying a spirit gathering formation would be an easy and joyful matter, and he would be done in a moment's time. In the end, he spent several hours and the problem still wasn't solved yet. Actually, even without formation flags and core, it's not entirely impossible to set up a grade 5 formation. By the side, Elder Wang Haoshuan seemed to have recalled something and interjected. Xianxia was taken aback. Through the books he had read through, He knew that these two items were necessities to setting up a formation. These were the basic materials, and there was no way to avoid them. Could it be possible that there was some secret method to go around it? You mean that? Guild leader Zheng seemed to have thought of something as well, and he quickly shook his head. Are you joking with me? That's impossible to accomplish. Why? Seeing that the duo seemed to have an idea in mind, Xianxia asked curiously. What he means is inscribing a formation plate. Guild leader Zhang smiled bitterly, but inscribing a formation plate is even harder than setting up a formation. It'll be impossible for one to succeed unless one reaches the level of a 5-star formation master. Formation plate. Xianxia was taken aback. Indeed. Why didn't he think of it? The formation plate was a unique material that could substitute formation flags and core. On top of that, it'll be impossible to inscribe with it without a specialized carving knife. I once bought a blank formation plate from the appraiser hall and tried inscribing it myself. However, the surface was incredibly tough and ordinary blades couldn't even leave a mark on it. How is one supposed to inscribe on it like that? Guild leader Zhang shook his head. The higher the grade of a formation, the greater the requirement on the quality of the formation plate. If the formation plate was too weak, it could crumble even before the formation was triggered. The carving knives in the guild were only suited for the use of 4-star formation master. Even though they had a 5-star blank formation plate, those knives were simply insufficient to inscribe anything on it. Needless to say, draw out a formation. Can you bring the grade 5 spirit gathering formation and formation plate so that I can take a look? If I really can't think of any solution, I'll drop the matter. Even though Xianxia knew that what the other party said was true, he wasn't willing to give up on this chance. Thus, he made the request. All right. Seeing the other party's insistence, guild leader Zheng nodded. Flicking his wrist, a jade token and a blank formation plate appeared in his hands. These two objects were the most valuable resources of the entire guild. As such, he carried them with him everywhere he went. Grabbing hold of the jade token, Xianxia immersed his consciousness into it. Just like the grade 4 formation blueprint jade token from before, the grade 5 spirit gathering formation blueprint was also extremely detailed. All kinds of demands were written clearly on it. Xianxia hurriedly remembered all of the details. It's indeed quite difficult to set up. Reorganizing the information in his mind, Xianxia sighed. Even though there was only a grade of difference between grade 5 and grade 4 formations, their difference was immense. If one's cultivation hadn't reached the required level, even if one had the formation flags and core, it would be very difficult to set it up properly. It was just like pill forging. Even if a 1-star apothecary possessed the pill formula of higher grade pills, he would still be unable to suppress the violent energy within the cauldron to forge a grade 2 or grade 3 pill. If the different ranks were so easy to overcome, there would be no need to create such a clear ranking system within the occupations. However, if I use the Library of Heaven's Path to find out the various errors and flaws in them, there's still a chance that I might succeed. With this cheat code, even though ordinary 4-star formation masters would be hard-pressed to prepare a formation of such a high grade, there was still a chance that Xianxia might succeed. Taking pill forging for example again, if there were no errors in the sequencing, one could easily guide a 1-star apothecary to forge a grade 2 pinnacle pill. Similarly, as long as there was no error in his sequencing, with just his cultivation as a half-transcension cultivator, there was still a good chance he could set up a grade 5 spirit gathering formation. But these were just thoughts. Without the required resources, there was nothing Xianxia could do at all. I should take a look at the formation plate. Dumping aside those miscellaneous thoughts, Xianxia took hold of the blank formation plate. The formation plate was black and heavy. It was a little hard to tell what it was crafted from, but if one were to only look at one of the surfaces, it resembled a smooth copper mirror. This is a carving knife. You can give it a try. Seeing that Xianxia was still carrying some hope over the matter, guild leader Zheng whipped out a carving knife with a flick of his wrist and passed it over to him. Grabbing hold of the knife, Xianxia drove the Xianxia in his body and slit it across the smooth surface of the formation plate. Jia! Jia! A screeching sound echoed. Even though the carving knife was sharp, it wasn't able to leave a single mark on the blank formation plate. Xianxia smiled bitterly. It seemed like what the other party said was true. Given how the carving knife couldn't leave a mark on it at all, it was impossible to inscribe the formation on it. Flaws. Frustrated, Xianxia muttered silently while holding the blank formation plate. Who? A book appeared in the library of Heaven's Path. He slowly opened it. Grade 5 blank formation plate. Crafted using frigid silver and 9-inch gold by 5-star blacksmith Xianxia. It is incomparably resilient, and only a spirit high-tier carving knife or a spirit intermediate-tier weapon paired with weapon intent can leave a mark on it. Flaws. Several flaws were detailed on the book. Sweeping through them, Xianxia realized that the flaws were beyond his current ability to exploit. Thus, he was preparing to put it down when he suddenly froze. A spirit intermediate-tier weapon paired with weapon intent can also leave a mark on it. A spirit high-tier carving knife was a tool specially made for 5-star formation masters. As such, it was impossible to obtain it. However, speaking of spirit intermediate-tier weapons, some of the transcendent Mortal 4 Dan experts possessed them. Thus, it wasn't too difficult to find it in Honghai City. In fact, a lot of treasures that Hall Master Sai gathered were of that level. As for weapon intent, given that Xianxia had even comprehended sword heart already, it wasn't a problem at all. The sharp edge that weapon intent provided was sufficient to make up for the deficiency in the quality of the weapon. The more Xianxia thought about it, the more he felt that it was possible. As such, with glowing eyes, Xianxia raised his head and said, "I know how I can carve it now. Is there anyone of you who have a spirit intermediate tier sword? May I borrow it for a moment?" Spirit intermediate tier sword. Guild leader Zheng was taken aback. "I have one, what do you need it for?" "I'll explain later, just lend it to me for a moment," Xianxia said. "All right then." Knowing that it was impossible for the other party to escape with his item, guild leader Zheng flicked his wrist and passed a sword over. Grabbing over the sword, Xianxia slowly drew it from its sheath. A cold gleam immediately reflected on Xianxia's face. Even without infusing Xianxia into it, he could already feel overwhelming spiritual energy weighing down on him from it. As expected of a spirit intermediate tier weapon, it was truly much stronger than the weapons he had used before. However, as soon as the sword was out of the sheath, a spirit wave began pulsing out from the sword. The sword was trying to struggle free out of his grasp. A weapon of this tier also possessed its own spirit. It could acknowledge a master, and if someone who wasn't its master tried to wield it, it could possibly go berserk and even injure the wielder. "I apologize. This sword has been with me for quite a long time, so it's a little apprehensive of strangers. Allow me to talk to it for a moment." Seeing that the sword was on the verge of escaping at any moment, guild leader Zheng immediately walked up with a reddened face and stroked his finger on the blade of the sword, as though cajoling a lover. "All right, Xianxia needs your help for a moment, so listen to him obediently." Hearing guild leader Zheng speak up for Xianxia's stead, the sword seemed to have suffered a great injustice and its trembling grew even more intense. "Cough cough. Don't worry. I'll try again." Embarrassed, guild leader Zheng continued to stroke the sword and attempted to placate it. However, the sword didn't seem to be willing to give in at all. The more guild leader Zheng tried to persuade it, the more violent its response. "Old Zheng, you've owned this imperial jade sword for a very long time already, but you haven't made it submit to you yet." Hall Master Sai couldn't help but ask. He was the one who sold the sword to the other party 5 years ago. He didn't expect that the other party hadn't won the acknowledgement of the sword yet. Once a weapon acknowledged a master, it would respectfully listen to the commands of its master. In any case, it was impossible for it to react so violently. Cough cough. You know that the acknowledgement process is extremely complex. After accompanying it daily throughout the years, even eating and sleeping with it, the situation is already slightly better now. It's beginning to listen to my instructions now. Don't worry, give me an hour to talk to it, I guarantee you that there won't be any problems. Guild leader Zheng smiled awkwardly. There was no secret to making a spirit weapon acknowledge one had to accompany it daily and temper it with one's Xianxia. The imperial jade sword had been with him for nearly 5 years now, and the spirit was on the verge of recognizing him already. Even though he was still a long way off from achieving an acknowledgement, the relationship of the two of them was already intimate. If he were to talk to it, it would still listen to his words. An hour is a bit too long. Pass me your sword. Hearing that it would take so long to calm down a spirit intermediate tier weapon, Xianxia shook his head. Pass it to you. Guild leader Zheng was taken aback. Do you have an idea in mind? Unwilling to waste his time on words, Xianxia created a loop with his thumb and middle finger, and he struck the sword on its tip, blade, and hilt. Who? It was as though the sword had met something that had terrified it greatly, and it began to tremble violently. With a darkened complexion, Xianxia berated, You'd better stay put obediently. If you were to cause any more ruckus, I'll cripple you. Wang! Upon hearing those words, the sword immediately stopped its actions. Then, a sound reminiscent to the chiming of a bell sounded, reverberating straight within one's soul. Spirit euphoria. Guild leader Zheng's body froze and his eyeballs nearly popped out from their sockets. The Imperial Jade Sword has acknowledged him as its master? This. What in the world happened? Chapter 487. Does anyone have a saber? The sword had accompanied him for 5 whole years, and the time he spent with it was even more than that of his own wife. Even so, he was still unable to fully tame it yet. On the other hand, the young man before him had only bellowed at it and it immediately produced spirit euphoria. Euphoria your head. Could you be even more shameless than that? I treated you as though you were my ancestor, and not only did you not know gratitude, you even dumped me for someone else, acknowledging someone else as your master. Guild leader Zheng felt as though his heart was being torn apart by countless blades. His chest felt so stifled that he could spurt blood at any moment. His entire face had turned green. What the heck was this? Could it be that he had to use forceful measures on this sword to force it into submission? Seeing the awful complexion on his old friend, Hall Master Sai slapped his forehead. This was an overpowered appraiser who could even make the harmonious stream of flowing goblets acknowledge him. Wasn't earning the acknowledgement of the Imperial Jade Sword a walk in the park for him? Xianxia is just borrowing your sword, he doesn't intend to take it away. Fearful that his old friend might pass out at this rate, he hurriedly sent a telepathic message over. UN. Only after hearing those words did guild leader Zheng finally calm down. He suppressed the urge to spurt blood and turned to look at the young man as a sliver of doubt rose within him. Wasn't he going to inscribe on the formation plate? Why is he borrowing a sword? The other party had declared that he was going to try inscribing on the formation plate, so why in the world did he make the sword acknowledge him? It's to inscribe the formation plate. Grabbing the grade 5 blank formation plate, Xianxia flung his hand. Pang! The formation plate lodged itself onto the wall not too far away, as though a mirror nailed onto a wall. After securing the formation plate well, Xianxia's eyebrows shot up and a ferocious might gushed out from him. Flicking his sword, a radiant aura shrouded it. Sword intent. Sword heart. Hearing the crisp buzz of the sword, guild leader Zheng narrowed his eyes. Despite being a transcendent mortal 4-dan expert, he hadn't comprehended sword heart yet. To think that a fellow who wasn't even 20 yet would have reached such a level. Appraising, formation, and now sword heart. What in the world was he incapable of? Weapon intent is incomparably sharp, and the might of a spirit weapon infused with it can be brought up by a notch. It can't be that you intend to use the sword to inscribe the formation. As the thought arose in his mind, guild leader Zheng nearly choked on his own saliva. A grade 5 formation plate could only be inscribed on by a spirit high-tier inscribing knife. However, a tool of that level couldn't be found in the Myriad Kingdom Alliance. This fellow couldn't possibly be thinking of complementing the sword with weapon intent to replace it. It was easy to make mistakes during the inscribing process, even with something as light and small as the inscribing knife. To use a sword directly. Are you here to play around? Using a sword to inscribe a formation. Putting aside whether I've seen it before, I haven't even heard of such a thing before. You must be pulling my leg. Using a sword to inscribe a formation. Hall Master Sai and Wang Haoshuan's vision also darkened. This was no longer about being brazen, this was insanity. One might be able to wield a sword with astounding dexterity, but to use a 3 kai long sword to inscribe marks that were countless times thinner than a strand of hair. How in the world did such a ridiculous notion even appear in his mind? Ding 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 ding. But before he could recover from the young man's actions, a metallic sound coming from the contact between the sword tip and the formation plate sounded. Slowly, a thin mark appeared on the surface of the smooth formation plate. It's really possible. His vision went dark again. What kind of monster was this? To be able to draw formation marks with a sword. Exactly how adept was he with a sword? To think that I often make mistakes even when using a carving knife. Wang Haoshuan's lips trembled non-stop. Even as a 4-star formation master, he still often made mistakes while inscribing on a formation plate. Yet, the other party was using a sword, which meant that he had to inscribe from a distance of 3 kai away. Must you be so exaggerated? It's workable. Contrary to everyone's shock, upon seeing the formation marks appear on the blank formation plate, Xianxia's eyes gradually grew brighter and brighter. He had only thought of complementing the sword with sword intent to do the inscribing on a whim, so he didn't really give much of an expectation for it. Driving his soul depth to the limit, his eye of insight flickered as he measured the various imperceptible bumps and depressions on the formation plate. Holding the sword tightly, he strictly followed the method detailed in the Heaven's Path formation art to inscribe the formation on the plate. If a master teacher were here, he would definitely realize that Xianxia had reached a unique state at the moment. Vanquishing facade, lucid mind, lucid analytical realm. After the state of mind 2 Dan heart of tranquil water was this lucid analytical realm. Knowledge was omnipresent, only waiting to be analyzed. At this realm, one would be able to peer through chaos to see the crux. At the same time, with a clearer mind, one's analytical power would grow substantially stronger. Paired with the eye of insight, Xianxia was able to inscribe the formation marks orderly, unaffected by any disturbances or emotions. Other formation masters had to use a carving knife to inscribe the thin formation marks, but Xianxia could do the same with a sword. While the Heaven's Path formation art played a part in that, what played a more significant role was this ability unique to only master teachers. To use a sword to inscribe a formation plate. It's no wonder why he can break formations with a single kick. Who in the world is this expert? By the side, the senior, juniors, and others were so shocked that their hearts were about to stop beating. Other people had to use carving knives to complete the delicate actions, but this fellow went on to use a sword instead. What left them even more frenzied was that he was able to do it as exquisitely as others. Even when witnessing it with their own eyes, they still found the entire sight incredulous. Ding 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 ding. After an unknown period of time, Xianxia retracted his sword and came to a halt. Then, he began to pant heavily. Sword intent is an actualization of one's concentration. It's very easy for one to get exhausted by maintaining the state for a long time, not to mention, when doing such a delicate job. Upon seeing his state, guild leader Zheng tried to persuade him. There's no need to hurry. A formation plate isn't something that can be inscribed completely within a day. You should take your time. Sword intent represented a cultivator's comprehension toward swordsmanship. Activating it for a short period of time was still manageable, but even with Xianxia's pure Heaven's Path Xianxia, maintaining it for an extended period of time wasn't too possible. UN. Nodding his head, Xianxia began recuperating for a moment. He stared at the formation plate fixed on the wall with a grim expression. Even though his comprehension of sword intent had already reached the level of sword heart, he was still unable to maintain that state for extended periods of time. In just a short moment, he already found himself on the verge of collapsing. If he were to forcefully continue on, he might possibly wreck his previous efforts due to his unstable condition. If sword intent is a bottle filled with water, if it were to be poured out, there will come a point at which it will run dry. Frowning, Xianxia fell into contemplation. I'm already dried out at the moment, but the formation plate isn't even halfway there yet. It'll at least take a day or two of recuperation for my sword intent to recover. Sword intent was similar to Xianxia. There was a limit to how much one could use it at a moment, and if one were to use it repeatedly, one would find himself sapped dry. And that was exactly what Xianxia's current state was. Even so, The formation plate in front of him wasn't even half done yet. What should he do? Did he have to slowly complete it over a course of few days, just as the other party said? If Guild Leader Zheng were to learn of his thoughts, he would surely think that the world had gone mad. Even 5-star formation masters would require several days to inscribe such a high-grade formation plate with a carving knife. With a sword in hand, the other party still expects to finish it swiftly. Wasn't this clearly daydreaming? Just as Xianxia was conflicted over the next course of action, his eyes suddenly lit up. On top of sword intent, he had comprehended saber intent as well. Right. Since I can inscribe it with sword intent, saber intent should work as well. Even though my sword intent is sapped dry at the moment, my saber intent is still at its capacity. Having learned Heaven's Path saber art before, his grasp over sabers had reached an incredibly high level of mastery. Even though he couldn't activate his sword intent anymore, he hadn't expended his saber intent yet. It was still a full bottle ready to be used at his disposal. Chuckling lightly, he stood up and surveyed the surroundings. Does anyone have a spirit intermediate tier saber here? Even though it was possible to utilize saber intent through a sword as well, due to the differing nature of the two swords, the might and accuracy of his movements might take a toll. There was no need for Xianxia to take such a risk. Saber. Stars appeared above everyone's head. Aren't you using a sword to inscribe the formation plate? Why do you need a saber? I have one here. After a moment of hesitation, Hall Master Sai flicked his wrist and a 9-ring saber appeared in his palm. It was heavy and ferocious, and one could feel a violent disposition from it. Allow me to borrow it for a moment. Walking forward, Xianxia grabbed the saber and flicked it lightly. A sound similar to the call of a dragon echoed. Good saber. From that, it was clear that the saber was a formidable spirit weapon. It wasn't inferior to the Imperial Jade Sword at all. I'll return you the sword first. With a saber in hand now, Xianxia tossed the sword that he borrowed back to Guild Leader Zheng. Even though the weapon had acknowledged him as its master, he had stated clearly before he was just borrowing it. Since that was the case, he had no thoughts of claiming it for himself. Besides, he didn't have much of an expectation for his weapon. Even though the Imperial Jade Sword was excellent, he didn't possess any greed for it. And if he really needed one, he could always buy one for himself. If he had harbored such thoughts, he would have long carried the harmonious stream of flowing goblets away with him. There would be no need for him to negotiate with the appraiser hall and let them off. This. Catching the sword, Guild Leader Zheng's face turned red in embarrassment. Spirit artifacts possessed consciousness, and usually, if the spirit chose to acknowledge another master, even if the original owner was reluctant to do so, most would still choose to part with it. After all, if one were to forcefully attempt to retain control over the weapon, not only would one be unable to earn the acknowledgement of the spirit, one might even incur its hostility. There was no use keeping a sword that was hostile to one. Since that was the case, one might as well sell the other party a favor. Perhaps, one might even get a good price for it. Thus, he thought that after Xianxia had induced spirit euphoria in the Imperial Jade Sword, he would have to bid the sword goodbye. Yet, the other party simply returned it back to him, showing no signs of wanting to claim it for his own. Xianxia, you seem to be fated with this Imperial Jade Sword given how easily you induced spirit euphoria in it. Such compatibility between a weapon and a human is extremely rare, and these encounters usually end up going on to become legends. I've owned this sword for nearly 5 years now, but still, I'm unable to get its spirit to submit to me. Since that's the case, I might as well just gift it to you and fulfill the both of you. Gritting his teeth, Guild Leader Zheng presented the sword back to Xianxia. No one could easily part with a companion who had accompanied one over a span of 5 years. However, this sword had already chosen its master, and there was no use keeping it to himself. Thus, he might as well extend his generosity to the other party. After finishing his piece, he thought the other party would immediately take the sword away. However, contrary to his expectations, there was no movement at all. Lifting his head, it seemed like that Xianxia hadn't been listening to his words. Rather, he was tapping his fingers on several points on the 9-ring saber that he just grabbed. Wang! A crisp call echoed from the saber. Guild Leader Zheng's lips turned white and his hands trembled. He nearly threw his sword aside out of agitation. Spirit euphoria. This saber has acknowledged him as its master as well. Chapter 488. Self-activating sentient formation plate. He had just said that spirit euphoria was extremely rare, and encounters like the one a moment ago would tend to go on and become a legend. Yet, at the very next moment, this saber came and did the same as well. Were they so eager to find a master for themselves? You all are spirit weapons. You're supposed to have your own consciousness and pride, and not submit to anyone easily. When did you all become so easy to deal with? If you are so easy to deal with, then what do the 5 years that I spent wiping the Imperial Jade Sword and nourishing it with my Xianxia count as? Guild leader Zheng felt faint-headed. He was just about to continue speaking when in front of him, Xianxia flicked his wrist and a burst of aura shot forth from the saber. Then, grabbing the saber tightly, he hacked it straight toward the formation plate. Be careful. Guild leader Zheng was taken aback. However, before he could finish his words abruptly stopped. Unlike what he imagined, the powerful saber chi didn't tear apart the formation plate. Rather, it left strokes and strokes of formation marks on it. The other party was actually using a saber to inscribe formation marks. While most transcendent mortal experts hadn't even comprehended a single weapon intent, he had actually comprehended 2 already. Just this sight in itself was enough to send him into a frenzy. Your swordsmanship is light and adept, allowing you to use it in replacement of a carving knife to inscribe the formation marks. Fine, I admit that you possess incredible mastery, so I'll accept it. But sabers are heavy and bulky, especially 9-ring sabers. That one in your hand definitely weighs at least several dozen kilograms. Ordinary men would find it tiring just to lift it, but to use it to inscribe formation marks. How in the world are you doing it? Can formation marks be inscribed like that? Guild leader Zheng's vision turned dark and his body trembled in agitation. He had studied formations for more than 80 years now, and he had always thought that his aptitude was above average, especially when it came to inscribing formation plates. However, after seeing the other party's actions, he realized that he was sorely mistaken. Since his talent was great, could he use swords to inscribe formation marks? Could he use the bulky sabers to inscribe formation marks? Clearly, not. That was a thought he dared not harbor at all. Ding 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 ding. As the saber came into contact with the formation plate, the number of marks on the originally mirror-like surface increased swiftly. Just as Guild leader Zheng thought that the other party would complete the inscription process in a single breath, the other party tossed aside the saber in his hand, wiped the sweat off his forehead and looked over expectantly. Does anyone have a spear? The crowd. A moment later, holding onto a spear, the young man stood at a distance 4 meters away as he brushed the tip of the spear on the formation plate on the wall.
Bang bang bang.
The spear moved swiftly, and just like with the sword and saber previously, formation marks swiftly appeared on the formation plate. Grabbing onto their chests, Guild leader Zhang and Wang Haoshuan stared at one another. Even when using carving knives, the both of them had to inscribe the marks slowly for fear of making an error. Yet, this fellow used a sword, saber, and now he was going to the extent of even using a spear. If he couldn't complete it with this spear, would he use a hammer next? All of the formation masters that they knew of inscribed every stroke on a formation plate carefully as though a piece of art, fearful that it might break if they were to use excessive strength. Yet, the other party went to the extent of using weapons on it. Even though they were witnessing the sight for themselves, they still felt as though they were going mad. Some of the crowd clutched onto their chests while some covered their mouths as they witnessed the astonishing sight. In the meantime, Xianxia was still currently immersed in his work. Having consecutively used the weapon intent of 3 different weapons, even though he was left on the verge spewing blood, what was fortunate was that the formation plate he was working on was about to be completed. The final stroke. With glowing eyes, he flicked his spear and drew out an elegant arc at the very center of the formation plate. Hong long. Carrying immense strength, the spear struck the surface of the formation plate and a deafening rumbling sound echoed. The wall behind the formation plate was no longer able to withstand the immense pressure anymore and collapsed, leaving behind a gaping hole in its wake. Xianxia had fixed the formation plate on the wall to etch the inscription. Even though the formation plate wouldn't be damaged due to its toughness, The same didn't apply for the wall. Even though the Formation Master Guild had used the best green steel boulder as the foundation for the building, it was still insufficient to withstand the relentless rampaging might of the sword, saber, and spear. The corridor which the guild used to conduct the Formation Master examination collapsed and dust rose up from the surface, choking the surrounding crowd. Cough, cough. Looking at the ruins before him, the ashen-faced guild leader Zheng's mouth twitched. Are you here to take the Formation Master examination, or are you here to demolish the place? You first stopped the main formation of our guild before going ahead to destroy the walls. What the heck was this? What kind of grudge does our Formation Master Guild have with you? Is the formation plate still intact? Hall Master Sai hurried forward. Hearing those words, everyone suddenly recalled the matter and turned their gazes over. Given how even the infrastructure had collapsed, would the formation plate still be fine? I have no idea. Xianxia scratched his head. Hurrying forward, he quickly retrieved the round plate that was crushed under a thick layer of wreckage. He wasn't being humble by saying those words. He really had no idea whether the formation plate was still fine or not. Under normal circumstances, when he finished the final stroke on the formation plate, the formation should have been completed. However, he couldn't have expected the wall to crumble. As such, it was hard to tell whether there was any deviation in his final stroke or not. There was a possibility that the might of the formation might be significantly reduced with this error. He lowered his head to examine the formation plate. On the smooth surface of the formation plate, innumerable strokes of differing depths could be seen. It looked like an 8 trigrams formation, yet at the same time, it seemed to harness the laws of the world within it. With just a single look, one couldn't help but feel faint-headed. How is it? Guild leader Zheng asked anxiously. If a formation plate wasn't activated, it was hard to tell just by the formation marks itself whether it was a successful work or not. Let me give it a try. Xianxia replied. Knowing this logic, he placed his palm on it and infused his Xianxia in. Hoo-hoo. Nothing. A failure. Everyone's face paled. A completed formation plate should be instantaneously activated as soon as Xianxia was infused into it. Given that nothing happened at all, it could only mean that the formation plate was a failure. There was only this grade 5 blank formation plate in the guild. After going through so much trouble, going to the extent of using sword, saber, and spear intent, he still ended up in failure. Everyone looked at Xianxia in sympathy. In the end, the might of those weapons was still way too great. Even though you curbed their strength, it's still unsuitable to use them to inscribe a formation plate. Wang Haoshuan shook his head. It wasn't without reason why everyone chose to use carving knife to inscribe a formation plate. No matter how well one's control over his spear, sword, or saber was, it was still a weapon crafted for destruction. It was inevitable that it would damage the formation plate, so Xianxia's failure wasn't too unexpected. At that moment, guild leader Zheng suddenly shook his head. No, that's not it. If it's a failure, the formation plate should crumble. However, it is still intact and the spiritual energy within it is still flowing smoothly. Clearly, it isn't damaged at all. Ah! Wang Haoshuan was taken aback. What the other party said was true. A formation plate was, in essence, the miniaturization of a massive formation into a palm-sized round plate. As such massive energy was being condensed into such a small area, the slightest mistake would result in the plate breaking into innumerable fragments upon activation. But, even though the formation plate in front of them wasn't activated, the marks were still glowing as Xianxia flowed through it. There weren't any signs of the energy within going berserk as well. What was going on? If it was a success, why couldn't it be activated? But if it was a failure, how could it still be intact? Could the formation have been inscribed incorrectly? The spiritual energy gathering nature of the formation isn't working and that's why it is still intact. Wang Haoshuan asked. Inscribed wrongly? That's impossible. Xianxia shook his head. He had followed the blueprint strictly and even used the inscribing method within the Heaven's Path formation art for it. Even if he had made an error in his final stroke, it shouldn't have deviated too much from its original intention. Just as Xianxia was about to use the library of Heaven's Path to get to the bottom of the matter, Hall Master Sai's lips suddenly trembled as he walked forward. Can you allow me to take a look? Feel free. Seeing the other party's reaction, Xianxia was slightly bewildered. Even so, he passed the formation plate over. The reason why Xianxia managed to become a 5-star appraiser was mainly due to the help of the Library of Heaven's Path. In terms of understanding of artifacts, he was most probably still inferior to the other party. Hall Master Sai had immersed himself in the world of appraising for more than several decades by now. Even though he might not know much about formations, his intuition and eye of discernment still made his judgment a valuable one. The other party placed the formation plate on his palm. Before Hall Master Sai could take a closer look, the weight on his palm suddenly disappeared. The formation plate released a light buzz before flying back into Xianxia's embrace. As I expected. As I expected. With a reddened face, Hall Master Sai's body trembled uncontrollably. Seeing the other party's response, as though having realized something, Guild Leader Zheng couldn't rein in his curiosity any longer and hurriedly asked, "What's wrong? Is this formation plate a failure?" Wang Haoshuan asked as well. Failure. Taking a deep breath, Hall Master Sai calmed himself down and shook his head. How could that be possible? Then, everyone blinked in bewilderment. Even Xianxia was unable to comprehend the situation before him. If it was a success, why was he unable to activate it with Xianxia? Didn't you all see the formation plate leaving my hand on its own accord? Do you all still not understand it? Hall Master Sai spoke in agitation. This is clearly the reaction of a sentient tool. It has assessed me to be unsuitable, that's why it chose to leave. Sentient? You mean self-activating sentient formation plate? This. Guild Leader Zheng had to say this consecutively 3 times before he could bring himself back to reality. His eyes were widened and his body had stiffened. It was as though he had seen a ghost. That is the ability that only a grade 6 formation plate should have. How can a grade 5 formation plate achieve such a feat? Sentient formation plate. Wang Haoshuan also trembled in shock. He hurriedly turned his gaze to the formation plate in Xianxia's hand. The more he looked at it, the paler his face became. It seemed as though he would turn insane at any moment out of immense disbelief. What is going on? Seeing the frenzied look on everyone's faces, Xianxia was baffled. Even though he had collected all of the books in the library of the Formation Master Guild, and he had studied the Heaven's Path formation art as well, he hadn't assimilated them yet. Thus, he was still unaware of much of the jargon that formation masters used. It means that the formation plate has gained spirit. Guild Leader Zhang said with a quivering voice. Spirit? That does seem to be the case, but does it make a difference? Xianxia asked. Only when the other party spoke about it did he realize that it was indeed the case. Just like the Imperial Jade Sword, Saber, and Spear from before, this formation plate seemed to have sprouted its own spirit. However, as Xianxia had only just crafted it, he'd failed to notice the matter. Due to the size limitation and inability to harmonize entirely with the environment, ordinary formation plates could only display half of the strength of a normal formation. If the formation master inscribing it is lacking in proficiency, the ratio might go even lower. Noticing Xianxia's doubt, Guild Leader Zheng began to explain. Xianxia nodded his head, indicating that he knew about it. When he was reading through the books previously, he had learned about the unique nature of formation plates, so he wasn't too surprised over it. However, this nature only applies to ordinary formation plates. Sentient formation plates don't obey that law. With a flushed face, Guild Leader Zheng continued, not only can sentient formation plates bring out 90% of the strength of the formation, it could even grow stronger over time. In fact, even without infusing Xianxia into it, it can activate by itself. Chapter 489, Huanyu Empire. A formation plate that possessed spirit wasn't only strong, it was also capable of absorbing spiritual energy to grow. More importantly, even without the Xianxia of a cultivator, it could activate by itself. Even though self-activation didn't sound like a big deal, it could prove to be useful in desperate situations. For example, if a person was under immense danger and wasn't in the condition to come into contact with the formation plate, a spirit tool like this could potentially save one's life. Thus, a sentient formation plate was one of the most sought-after protective measures of cultivators. However, only 6-star formation masters had the ability to create them. Furthermore, luck played a huge role as to whether an inscription would create a sentient formation plate or not. Given the rarity of the object, he had only heard of it from rumors. As such, he didn't consider this possibility right from the start. In fact, even after Hall Master Sai confirmed it, he still found it hard to believe that the young man before him could inscribe a sentient formation plate. And more importantly, it was with a saber, a sword, and a spear. Who could have thought that those weapons could be used to inscribe formation plates as well? Recovering from the shock, Guild Master Zheng turned to look at Xianxia and sighed. To think that he had thought that his capability was at least on par with the other party previously. At this moment, he realized that there were unfair existences in this world known as geniuses. As soon as they made a move, one would only find themselves being left in the dust. To overcome 5 formations in just a few minutes, and stop the main formation maintaining the guild on top of that. To create a sentient formation plate using sword, saber, and spear. If it wasn't clear that his cultivation hadn't reached transcendent mortal yet, he would have thought that a 6-star formation master was going through all this trouble just to prank him. Disregarding the other party's shock, Xianxia asked, "You mean that this object can activate on its own accord?" "That's right. After one earns its acknowledgement, one will be able to communicate with it telepathically to activate the formation. There's no Xianxia required in the process at all." Guild leader Zheng nodded. "That's great." Hearing that it wasn't a failure in the inscribing process, Xianxia heaved a sigh of relief. Touching the formation plate lightly, he could somehow feel an overjoyed feeling being transmitted to him. Given that the formation plate was carved using the inscribing method detailed in the Heaven's Path formation plate, and he had utilized sword intent, saber intent, and spear intent just for it, he would find it hard to believe if the formation plate was ordinary. Acknowledge. Dripping a droplet of fresh blood on it, he found a communication bridge being slowly formed between him and the spirit of the formation plate. Activate. With a casual throw, the formation plate immediately activated in mid-air. The spiritual energy within the range of several thousand meters came gushing in as though a whirlpool was pulling them in. Due to the intensity of the attraction, a slight moaning sound reminiscent of frenzied wind being blown past a cave could be heard. Strong. Seeing the rate at which spiritual energy in the surroundings was being pulled in, everyone was taken aback. As expected of a grade 5 formation. Its might was indeed fearsome. Even though they weren't in the formation, they could still sense the overwhelming concentration of the spiritual energy within. It was at least 3 times that of the external surroundings. If one were to cultivate within it, one's rate of cultivation would definitely be increased by several folds. Furthermore, a sentient formation plate possessed the ability to repair its own damages. As long as one didn't use it too frequently or cause irreparable damage to it, there wasn't any limits on its usage. Not bad. Sensing that the might of the formation was similar to that described in the blueprint, Xianxia nodded his head in satisfaction. Grabbing forward, he put away the formation plate and turned to the elder not too far away. Guild leader Zheng, may I know the price of this blank formation plate? The sword, saber, and spear that Xianxia used for the inscribing process were borrowed, so he just had to return it. However, this blank formation plate was bought by the other party, but he was now claiming it for his own. Naturally, it was only right for him to ask for the price to compensate the other party. Xianxia, there's no need to worry about it. The formation plate is useless with me anyway, so just consider it as a gift from my part. Guild leader Zheng hurriedly turned down the matter. The young man before him was a person who was capable of inscribing a sentient formation plate. Given his young age, it was likely the other party would go on and accomplish great things in the future. Thus, Guild leader Zheng wanted to make use of this opportunity to strike up an amiable relationship with the other party. A gift. Frowning, Xianxia shook his head. It's not right for me to accept a gift when I haven't done anything deserving of it. How about this? Since you haven't earned the acknowledgement of the Imperial Jade Sword yet, I'll give you a hand in it. This can count as compensation for the formation plate. Accepting the favor of another meant to be tied in a karmic relationship with the other party. This burden was a little heavy to bear. You'll give me a hand in earning the acknowledgement of the Imperial Jade Sword? It's possible to help other people earn the acknowledgement of spirit equipment. Guild leader Zheng was taken aback. Earning the acknowledgement of a sword concerns one's intimacy with one's weapon. To succeed, one had to spend time with it so as to tighten their bonds. Cough cough, it's possible to help one in that? Why does it sound as though you are helping someone consummate their marriage? Of course. With a faint smile, Xianxia stretched his hand forward, grabbed the Imperial Jade Sword from his hand, and stroked it gently. The Imperial Jade Sword has already acknowledged you as its master, so how can it possibly accept me? Thinking that it was impossible, Guild leader Zhang shook his head. Don't worry, Xianxia is a 5-star appraiser. Since he says that he can make the Imperial Jade Sword acknowledge you, he must have an idea in mind. Seeing the disbelief in his old friend's mind, Hall Master Sai stroked his beard and said. His trust in the Xianxia's capability was nearly unconditional at this point. In his view, as long as the other party said that it was possible, it had to be possible. It was almost at the level of blind admiration already. An idea in mind. Seeing the confident expression of his old friend and recalling the various astounding deeds that the other party had done, Guild leader Zheng was suddenly filled with hope. Just as he was curious to see what kind of astounding means would this legendary figure use, the other party's cold, harsh voice sounded. You'd better acknowledge Guild leader Zhang as your master and listen to him obediently. Otherwise, you know that I can cripple you within seconds, right? Cough cough. Guild leader Zhang and Hall Master Sai choked on their saliva. Their faces turned green and they nearly burst into tears on the spot. They were curious to know what means the other party would use, but to think that it would be a threat. Do you not know that all spirit equipment are incomparably arrogant, and the one thing they do not fear are threats? To cripple the equipment within seconds. If it operated the same as a human, he wouldn't have been put into such a difficult situation in the first place. Why did this young man feel unfathomable, as though an incredible expert in one moment and a naive amateur in the next? Xianxia. Suppressing his dismal, Guild leader Zhang shook his head. He was just about to advise the other party to not waste his effort when he heard a woo sound. The Imperial Jade Sword suddenly flew toward him. Hurriedly catching it, he immediately felt the spirit euphoria within it. Clearly, the sword was acknowledging him as its master. Oh. Guild leader Zheng went into a frenzy. What was with this? If the other party's "I'll cripple you within seconds" actually worked, then what did his 5 years count for? If it was under normal circumstances, he would surely dance in joy upon seeing that the sword which he had been keeping beside him for numerous years was acknowledging him. But somehow, in the current situation, he didn't feel the slightest delight. Instead, he felt so stifled that he could spurt blood. It looks like I shouldn't be so gentle when trying to win the acknowledgement of spirit weapons in the future. Seems like callousness is the way to go. Dripping his blood on the Imperial Jade Sword to seal the relationship, Guild leader Zheng reflected on his own mistakes. I still have something to attend to, so I'll be taking my leave now. Having repaid the debt of the blank formation plate, Xianxia clasped his fist and bade farewell. His purpose at the Formation Master Guild was to find a spirit gathering formation. Since he had already succeeded, it was time for him to return to raise his cultivation. Farewell. Guild leader Zhang nodded his head. Watching the young man and Hall Master Sai leaving without any hesitation, Wang Haoshuan stepped forward and asked Guild leader Zheng, "What kind of person is this Xianxia?" "I've no idea as well. However, this matter has to be reported to the headquarters. The other party isn't even a transcendent mortal yet, but he was able to use a sword, saber, and spear to inscribe a sentient formation plate." Recalling the other party's actions, Guild leader Zheng's mouth twitched uncontrollably. "That's right, we have to report it immediately." Wang Haoshuan nodded in agreement. Since the other party had taken the Formation Master examination in their branch, he could be considered as one of their members. If they were to report this, the headquarters would surely reward them handsomely. The resources obtained from the reward would prove to be useful to them in breaking through their bottlenecks, and getting their own 5-star Formation Master would just be a matter of time. But before that, we have to look into Xianxia's background, where he came from and where he is heading to for the report. I'll be depending on you for this. Guild leader Zhang instructed. Yes. Wang Haoshuan nodded his head and hurriedly left. Not too long later, he returned with a piece of paper in hand. The paper detailed various information concerning Xianxia. As one of the greatest power on the continent, it wasn't difficult for the Formation Master Guild to look into the affairs of an individual. Not to mention, Xianxia and the others didn't try to conceal their trail either. He came from Xianxia Kingdom. In less than 3 months, he became a 2-star master teacher, 3-star apothecary, 3-star physician, 3-star painter, 2-star beast tamer, 5-star appraiser, quasi 4-star formation master. Browsing through the contents, Guild leader Zheng's lips went dry. The other party's capability had far exceeded his expectations. In less than 3 months, the other party had walked from a remote location like Xianxia Kingdom all the way to the Myriad Kingdom Alliance. Despite his young age, he was already a member of 7 occupations, and some of those were even higher than his. How in the world did he do it? I was also very shocked when I first saw it. Wang Haoshuan smiled bitterly. After gathering the news, he nearly died from shock. Actually, I wasn't the one who gathered this information. Xianxia had eradicated a small clan known as the Lin clan in Qianwu Kingdom, and that Lin clan had extremely close ties with the local Formation Master Guild. Most of the information on the paper was retrieved from there. Wang Haoshuan continued, however, even though we have so much information on his background, we still have no clue as to what he's going to do next. Should we ask him about it before reporting it to the headquarters? Guild leader Zhang shook his hands as he said, there's no need for it. Given his talents, there's little doubt that he's going to participate in the Myriad Kingdom Alliance's Master Teacher Tournament. Master Teacher Tournament. Wang Haoshuan was taken aback. The Master Teacher Tournament, which involves 27 other powers of influence rivaling the Myriad Kingdom Alliance. That's right. This is a tournament conducted by Huanyu Empire's Master Teacher Pavilion in collaboration with the 27 subordinate Master Teacher Pavilions under them. It's a grand gathering that happens once every decade. Given the extent of the other party's capability, he will surely participate in it. Even if that isn't the case, he would surely at least spectate the tournament. Guild leader Zhang said. Indeed. As an event initiated by the Tier 2 Huanyu Empire, it boasts of handsome reward. There is no genius who could resist its allure. Wang Haoshuan nodded in agreement. Given Xianxia's capability, he will definitely participate in it. All right, you should hurry up and report it. Even though we can't rival the Master Teacher Pavilion, we should at least make Formation Master his secondary occupation. We mustn't allow his talents to be buried in the dust. Saying so, Guild leader Zhang and Wang Haoshuan began walking toward the communication wall. Chapter 490. Transcendent Mortal. Returning to the appraiser hall, Xianxia immediately headed to his living quarters, secluded himself within a chamber, and immediately activated the Spirit Gathering Formation. Having collected innumerable books, learned 2 Dans of Heaven's Path formation art, sapped dry his sword intent, saber intent, and spear intent, Xianxia was already terribly exhausted. If not for an adamant will driving him, he would have long collapsed. Sitting at the center of the Spirit Gathering Formation, he flicked his hands and a pile of spirit stones appeared around him. TZZZZZZZZZZZ. As soon as the spirit stones were placed in the formation, the spiritual energy harnessed within was immediately extracted. As though vegetables being placed within an oiled wok, a sizzling sound could be heard. After which, the concentration of spiritual energy in the surrounding started rising swiftly. 3-fold, 4-fold, 5-fold. In the blink of an eye, the concentration in the area had already reached 6-fold of the surroundings. Pili Pala. As spiritual energy was being drawn rapidly, some of the spirit stones started crumbling. Paying it no heed, Xianxia continued adding in more spirit stones to fuel the formation. Eventually, when the concentration finally reached 10-fold, Xianxia stopped. At this concentration, it was already no different from the rate of absorbing spiritual energy from the spirit stone straight already. Begin. Since all preparations were done, Xianxia immediately widened the pores across his entire body to absorb the thick spiritual energy in the surroundings rapidly. Then, converting them into heaven's path Xianxia. He refilled the energy expenditure he had incurred before. 2 hours later, his fatigue disappeared without a trace and he felt revitalized. He had finally reached his peak condition. Breakthrough. Muttering softly, the overflowing heaven's path Xianxia in his body began to strike at the barriers restraining his further progress. Catcher. After a seemingly long period of time, a crisp sound reminiscent of a small chick breaking out of its shell sounded. As though having knocked down a ceiling capping him, Xianxia's body underwent an astonishing metamorphosis. Nourished, every single cell on his body and his soul were undergoing a rapid qualitative evolution. His lifespan, which was capped at 100, began rising at a speed visible to the eye. 110. 120. 130. His muscles and skin seemed to have been reborn, and they became even more supple and powerful. Of one's entire life, the growth stage at which one had the best skin was infancy. During that period time, one's body would be overflowing with vitality, allowing all injuries to heal swiftly. But along with the rise in one's age, as one consumed material food and the impurities in one's body started to increase, one's body would start to decline. As one's regenerative function lost out to the decline, one's bodily functions would gradually fail. The transcendent mortal realm served to overcome this limit. One who succeeded in the breakthrough would be brought back to their prime. Even a person who had a single foot in the grave would be overflowing with vitality. Even though the heaven's path Xianxia that Xianxia cultivated was incomparably pure and was highly beneficial to both his body and his soul, it still wasn't sufficient to grant him the strength and lifespan of a transcendent mortal. Thus, before this breakthrough, he was still constrained by the limits of a mortal. This was the difference in the level of existence. Take an ant and an elephant for example. Even the strongest ant could never defeat the weakest elephant. Thus, having this step into new realms, his body seemed to have been nourished by the most concentrated energy of the world, making him feel incredibly energized and revitalized. Continue. After reaching the prolonged longevity realm, Xianxia threw out another bunch of spirit stones and continued driving the transcendent mortal wand and heaven's path divine art. Just like that, he gradually broke through the various bottlenecks in his cultivation. Prolonged longevity realm primary stage. Prolonged longevity realm intermediate stage. Prolonged longevity realm advanced stage. 2 hours later, Xianxia finally reached prolonged longevity realm pinnacle. And at that moment, his lifespan had been increased from 100 to 200 years. At prolonged longevity realm pinnacle, one's lifespan would be doubled. When he exhaled deeply, unlike the usual turbid gas filled with impurities that were clogging up his meridians, it carried the light fragrance of nature. Having reached the level of a transcendent mortal, one's physical body would possess the quality similar to a newborn infant, untarnished by impurities or pollutants. Due to the overwhelming vitality within a child, it was extremely rare for them to suffer from bad breath. The current Xianxia was also the same. Hearing, sight, smell. My 5 senses have been significantly enhanced as well. Opening his eyes and looking at the distance, he could see the ants several dozen meters away clearly. In fact, even the singing of the canaries several hundred meters away were crystal clear to his ears. The rise in his cultivation realm had enhanced his 5 senses significantly. His reaction speed had increased by 2-fold. The enhanced senses made it easier for him to harmonize with the nature, thus facilitating the absorption of spiritual energy and increasing his rate of cultivation. No wonder there was the saying, beneath the transcendent mortals are all ants. Only upon reaching this realm could one understand how fearsome it was. It seems like Ding Hong is one of the weaker cultivators at prolonged longevity realm. Otherwise, it would definitely be impossible for me to subdue him so easily. Upon reaching this level, Xianxia realized how fortunate he was in his fight with Ding Hong back then. Without proper guidance, that fellow had fumbled his way through the realms. Even though he had successfully made the breakthrough, he was one of the weakest ones of the tier. If Xianxia had met with a transcendent mortal Wandan cultivator from the Myriad Kingdom Alliance back then instead, he would definitely have been in for a hard fight. After reaching transcendent mortal Wandan pinnacle, my strength, when totaled up, adds up to more than 200,000 ding. Clenching his fists tightly, Xianxia chuckled in joy. At prolonged longevity realm, only one's lifespan would be enhanced. As such, before reaching Transcendent Mortal 2 Dan, one's strength would be capped at 100,000. On the other hand, Xianxia had already achieved that might at half Transcension realm. At this moment, along with the rise in his cultivation realm, his strength had increased by 2 times, thus reaching 200,000. In terms of just strength, he was already comparable to a Transcendent Mortal 2 Dan Origin Energy Realm Intermediate Stage expert. At Origin Energy Realm Primary Stage, one would possess the strength of 150,000 ding, 200,000 ding at Intermediate Stage, 250,000 ding at Advanced Stage, and 300,000 ding at Pinnacle. And this was only in terms of Xianxia. If one were to factor in one's comprehension of the nature, the strength at one's disposal would be much greater. I can achieve breakthroughs swiftly via Heaven's Path Divine Art, but the expense is truly too great. Having gathered more than 1,000 cultivation technique manuals, Xianxia understood the rate of cultivation of ordinary Transcendent Mortal 1 Dan cultivators. Even the most talented person would require several years of hard work to climb from primary stage to pinnacle. However, Xianxia had done the same in just 2 hours. Anyone who had witnessed the speed of his cultivation could definitely die of shock. But while the speed was astounding, the expense was fearsome as well. After the breakthrough, his Heaven's Path Xianxia had undergone a qualitative change, becoming even purer and less viscous. If the Heaven's Path Xianxia were sand grains that could easily pass through small spaces previously, then at this moment, it was no different from flowing water. It could even slip through gaps that were indiscernible to the eye. With the increase in the purity of his Xianxia, naturally, the requirements for Xianxia's spiritual energy rose proportionately as well. Even though he had earned several 10,000 spirit stones through various means, there wasn't much of it that was sufficiently pure for him to absorb. Almost 90% of the spiritual energy contained within each spirit stone went to waste along with his cultivation. He thought that the amount of spirit stones he had earned should be sufficient for him to reach Transcendent Mortal 3 Dan or 4 Dan, but from the looks of it, he was being too naive. The spirit stones that he had earned from the appraiser hall, the wager, guidance, and sale of the soulless metal humanoid, had nearly dried out. In other words, he used up nearly 50,000 spirit stones just to advance from Prolonged Longevity Realm Primary Stage to Prolonged Longevity Realm Pinnacle. If it was anyone else, this amount of spirit stones would be more than sufficient for them to reach Transcendent Mortal 4 Dan. I'm back to becoming a poor bloke again. Smiling bitterly, Xianxia shook his head helplessly. 3 days ago, he had to go through so much trouble just to make 50,000 spirit stones. He thought that he had earned a huge wealth capable of rivaling several kingdoms already. Yet, to think that he would be back to square one after a cultivation session. It was no wonder why people say cultivating was a money-burning business. From the looks of it, the description couldn't be any more apartment. Without sufficient spirit stones, it would be difficult for him to raise his cultivation realm. This kind of low-tier spirit stone is no longer sufficient to fuel my cultivation. Smiling bitterly, Xianxia contemplated over his future course of action. Several 10,000 spirit stones were only sufficient to raise his cultivation by 1 realm. If he were to attempt to advance through origin energy or even higher realms, it was unimaginable how many spirit stones would be required. It felt as though even if he were to earn several 100,000 or even 1,000,000 spirit stones, it would still be far from sufficient to support his cultivation. Furthermore, there would come a point that the quality he required for his cultivation would exceed the purity of the spirit stone. At that point, all of the spirit stones would lose their worth. If Xianxia wanted to raise his cultivation swiftly, he would have to find some way to obtain a middle-tier spirit stone. This kind of spirit stone possessed spiritual energy of extremely high purity, which was much easier and more convenient to absorb. 3 days is up. Luo Zhu should be done by now. I should hurry over to the Soul Oracle tomb to find a way to save Lu Chong. Standing up, Xianxia walked out of the chamber. It was already the 2nd day when Xianxia went to the Formation Master Guild. After the hassle there and the 4 hours spent on cultivation after returning, it was already around the promised time they agreed on. This trip to the Soul Oracle tomb would determine whether Lu Chong could be awoken from his coma or not. Xianxia would not allow any hiccups to occur. Heading to the lounge, he realized that Luo Zhu had already arrived. Zhao Ya and the others were also done with their cultivation, and they were standing by the side of the room. His students didn't let down his expectations. In 3 days' time, they had all reached Zhizuan realm. This was especially so for Zhao Ya, who had reached Zhizuan realm intermediate stage. From her aura, one could vaguely feel overwhelming power. Sun Qiong hadn't been slacking off the past 3 days as well. He had completely reinforced his cultivation as a transcendent mortal one Dan. Even though he was still a far way off from matching up to Zhongxian, as compared to his cultivation of Xianxia realm a few months ago, he had come quite a long way in this limited period of time. Zhongxia. Upon noticing his arrival, everyone turned their gazes over. Are you done with the preparations? If so, let's set off, Zhongxian said. I'm done with the preparations. Luo Zhu nodded his head. The items he needed for the trip to the Soul Oracle Tomb were all ready. Do you all intend to accompany us to the Soul Oracle Tomb, or are you all returning to the Myriad Kingdom Alliance? Zhongxian turned to Zhao Feiwu and the others. The Soul Oracle Tomb is dangerous, so we'll pass on the offer. Jin Songhai was just about to reject the request when Zhao Feiwu interrupted. Of course we'll be following as well. I've only read about the Soul Oracles from ancient texts. If their inheritance can really be found in the tomb, then it'll be worth going through the danger. Gong. Gongzi, your body. Alarmed, Jin Songhai hurriedly persuaded. He wasn't weak, and he was confident of protecting the Gongzi under most circumstances. However, the Soul Oracle Tomb was simply uncharted territories. It was a treacherous location even for him. Gongzi's cultivation was as good as null, and if they were to head there like that, he wasn't confident of ensuring the latter's safety. As the other party's subordinate, he didn't dare to take such risks. Don't worry. Even though my fighting prowess is lacking, I am more than capable of protecting myself. Zhao Feiwu chuckled lightly. Besides, isn't Zhongxia here? I am eagerly waiting to see how he will wreak havoc in the Soul Oracle Tomb. But, hearing the other party's resolute voice, Jin Songhai was conflicted. However, he still gave in eventually. All right then, let's set off. Since everyone had already made up their minds, they climbed onto the back of the spirit beast without any hesitation. This mount was Zhao Feiwu's spirit beast, and it had a wide back. Even though more than a dozen people were riding on it, it wasn't cramped at all. Spreading its wings, it soared into the vast skies. Soul Oracle Tomb, here we come. Thank you for listening to PandaAudioBooks. If you love what you hear and want to support my work, check out the PayPal link in the description. Every bit helps. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and hit that notifications bell to stay updated with all our latest audiobook chapters. We'll see you in the next one.